will be made tonight. The count of more than 13.6 million votes has begun to decide who will govern Australia for the next 3 years.
On November 24, Australians will face a stark choice.
Love me or loathe me, the Australian people know where I stand.
I approach this election with a passionate commitment to Australia's future.
I want to be Prime Minister again so that we can build an even stronger and greater Australia.
The government of Australia must now change.
And what a long and intense campaign this has been. Hello, I'm Kerry O'Brien, and wherever you're watching across the nation or around the Asia-Pacific region on the ABC's Australia Network, welcome to Australia Votes 2007. After almost an entire year of polls consistently pointing to a comfortable Labor victory under the new leadership of Kevin Rudd, the main opinion polls have suddenly moved in different directions in the final days, creating a state of some confusion. Galaxy and Newspoll both saying 52 to 48% for Labor in two-party preferred terms, which would make the vote very tight indeed, with the coalition protecting its hold on government with a 16-seat buffer. AC Nielsen, on the other hand, went off in the other direction, giving it to Labor by 57% to 43%. That would be a massive landslide, and we'll know soon enough, and already the evidence is there, that there is some swing, it seems, in exit polls at least, and certainly in anecdotal evidence coming back from around the country of a swing towards Labor. In the next 20 minutes or so, we'll be able to start assessing the count in South East Australia, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. Half an hour later in South Australia and the Northern Territory, then Queensland, which doesn't have daylight saving, and where we can expect plenty of action tonight. Finally, the West, which just might have the last word on who's going to govern. There could be up to 40 seats in play tonight, with a number of high-profile politicians, senior ministers, even the Prime Minister, Mr Howard himself, fighting desperately to hold their seats. Our team of experts tonight won't just help you unravel the trends, they'll see the surprises coming. Julia Gillard, Labor's Deputy Leader and Shadow Industrial Relations Minister, is hoping to claim her own corner of political history tonight as Australia's first female Deputy Prime Minister. We're going to have to wait and see. Nick Minchin is the Government Senate Leader, Finance Minister and long-time confidant of the Prime Minister. They'll both be drawing on the ABC's computer election data and backup from their party headquarters and nationwide teams of scrutineers, witnessing the count from electorate to electorate around the country. Julia Gillard, you've come from Victoria today. You've been hearing what's going on around the country from your own party internal intelligence. What's your story?
Well, Kerry, we've always known we needed to win 16 seats to win this election, so despite good national polls, for us it's always been about what the movements on the ground are going to be. Tonight I'll be looking towards Queensland and New South Wales. Obviously my home state of Victoria is already at a pretty good high point for Labor, but if we can make some gains there, that would be great. And where I originally grew up, South Australia, I think might be kind to us as well. But it'll all be the swings, and I expect there to be some variability around the country.
And we've seen those polls suddenly starting to swing around a bit in the last few days. Are you still confident that Queensland and New South Wales are going to hold up for Labor?
I'm never confident until I see a number, but my sense has been that people are looking for change. They feel that it is time for change. They've certainly looked towards Kevin for new leadership, if I can use the slogan. I think Kevin's fought a magnificent campaign on the issues that really matter to people, and I think work choices is one of the big turn-off factors for the government. That's particularly true, I believe, in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia.
Nick Minchin, you've no doubt spent your day travelling the booths around Adelaide, and you've been getting your intelligence from around the rest of the country. You've faced the most consistent polling message right through this year of any pre-election period that I can think of, including 96. So how are you feeling right now in the face of all of that?
Well, very nervous, Kerry. I'm sure Julia is too. It's a momentous occasion, as always, the possibility of a change of government in the country. My sense is that, I think to be realistic, there will be a swing to Labor. Labor will gain seats tonight, but I still feel that they're going to fall short of that 16. As Julia said, 16 seats is a tough ask. And we've seen the polling trend back to us in these last few days. and I think that trend has occurred. It is tightening up as we would have expected to do so. So I think it's going to be an interesting night because there'll be some seats we'll hold against the odds, others we might lose we weren't expecting to lose. So I think we'll all be on the edge of our seats all night.
Now, what about New South Wales and Queensland? Initially, the figures seemed to be strongest for Labor in Queensland and South Australia, but then New South Wales seemed to kick in for them. And the way it's panned out leading right up to this moment, it seems that Labor is banking its hopes substantially on those two states.
Well, New South Wales will be fascinating. I think the reality is Parramatta, is notionally Liberal but has a Labor member. I think you could say that's probably a Labor gain. Obviously, Lindsay is going to be rather difficult to hold, I suspect, in the circumstances. And then you've got the fascination of Wentworth and Bennelong, which are going to be tough. I mean, I think we will hold those two. But then there's about 3 or 4 other seats in New South Wales that are going to be quite tight. This could be a night where we don't know the result, because
I'm intrigued about the issue of Bennelong, because if the Prime Minister himself and the tenure of government is an issue on which people end up voting tonight, won't those same issues strike a chord in his own electorate as they would elsewhere in the nation?
Well, I think it'll cut both ways. There'll be a lot of voters who will vote for the Prime Minister. It's a big thing to have the Prime Minister as your member, and will vote for him on that basis. And he's the most high-profile candidate in the country. On the other hand, it must be said Labor's run the biggest and most expensive campaign ever against him. So it's going to be tight.
Well, no doubt we'll be coming back to this discussion several times at least throughout the night. To weave his unique brand of electoral magic, the man who's become an institution on election night, ABC analyst Anthony Green. Now, Anthony, of course, the polls have just closed, the counting has just started. It'll probably be another 15 to 20 minutes at least before we start to get any meaningful figures. But where are you looking tonight, in the main, for what's going to tell us what's going on?
Well, with the time zones, the first seats we'll be looking at are seats like Bass and Braddon. They tend to report very quickly. You tend to get seats from the outlying parts of Victoria, Gippsland, McEwen, some of those, Macmillan, which are outside of the metropolitan area. They always come in before metropolitan booths. And in New South Wales, small booths in seats like Eden Monaro, Richmond, Page, they're the sort of early figures you tend to see. The first figures in the first 15 minutes are always from the wrong places, but over the next 15 minutes.
You never know. We've got the scrutineers who'll be phoning in too. Tell me, is there any point in taking a look at the chamber graphic just so we can see the existing state of the Parliament?
Well, if we can look at the existing chamber, and at this stage, this is the situation going into the election, taking account of the redistribution and taking account of the death of Peter Andren and retirements. So we're saying 88 for the Coalition, 75 for Liberals, 13 Nationals, 60 for Labor and 2 others. And that's the situation we're starting from tonight. Labor needs 16 seats on a uniform swing of 4.8%. The interesting thing is, will the swing be uniform? Will they get the first 16, or if there's any miss out, will they need a seat on a swing beyond 4.8%?
OK, so we're going to be seeing a number of those seats are going to be moving around tonight. Whether enough of them stack up for Labor remains to be seen. Also joining us tonight is the 7:30 Report's political editor, Michael Brissenden, with a head full of accumulated political cliches after covering the longest campaign in Australian history, because it's really been running with incredible intensity all year. Michael, these past 6 weeks particularly, the issues would have crystallised. What do you think are going to be the standout issues that will determine this outcome?
Well, look, I think for a start, interest rates was always going to be an issue in this campaign. This has been an historic campaign for a number of reasons. First of all, we've had a Prime Minister go into it telling the Australian people that he wasn't going to be there for the full period of the next term. That's the first time that's happened. We also had an interest rate rise in the middle of it for the first time in an election campaign. And given that the economy was such a central pillar of the government's argument, both in 2004 and again, an interest rate rise in the middle of the campaign was always going to be difficult. And look, I think that's where their economic message raised and fell, really. I mean, that threw them offline in the middle of the campaign, and I'm not sure that they really recovered, although in the last week I think the economic message started to come back a bit for the government.
And what intelligence have you been picking up in terms of this last week and particularly now, what states may have held for the government or held for Labor and so on?
Well, look, Queensland and New South Wales were always going to be the states that the Labor Party was hoping they were going to pick up the most seats in. New South Wales has held up very well consistently. Queensland, apparently there's a little bit of softening in Queensland over the last couple of days, but Labor's still very confident about Queensland. South Australia is going strongly to the Labor Party. Western Australia is apparently going back to the government in the last day or so.
OK. On the tally room floor, we also have the expert services of Radio National anchor Fran Kelly, and she's standing by now with Communications Minister and New South Wales Liberal Senator Helen Coonan.
Senator Coonan, the big question is, what are you hearing from the booths? What's your latest mail?
Well, the latest mail is, of course, from the polls that the trend is the Coalition's friend, but obviously we've got to wait and see how the vote actually comes in and gets counted. It will be, I think, extremely tight. We're very hopeful of coming on the right side of those 16 seats, and I've recently had some conversations with colleagues in the West, and they suggest that it's holding pretty well there.
What about a west closer to home for you in Western Sydney? Because there's a number of seats there that Labor is hoping to take away from the Coalition. You have been out and about in the seats this morning. What was the mood? Because the suggestion coming unofficially is that the Liberals are worried about the trend in Sydney.
Well, I do think that New South Wales is going to be a very tough call, and I imagine that certainly the opposition would want to be, Labor would want to be picking up at least 6 seats in New South Wales. We're very hopeful of holding in Victoria, where obviously the percentage is about 5% upwards, and we don't know what will happen in Queensland, so we know that Labor will need to win in the big states largely to hold off any challenge from the West.
The big hurdle for you in this campaign, is it quite simply the it's time factor?
Well, look, I don't think that that's really the case. I mean, the Prime Minister has been a magnificent Prime Minister, and I think that just the fact that the recent polls show that there's certainly no anger out there in the community, and it tends to suggest that people think the country is travelling in the right direction. That's been a very strong message that we've had out of the last couple of days.
And just finally, later in the night, the Senate battle will become clearer. What's your prediction for the Senate? Nobody really thinks the government's going to maintain the balance of power. What about that third coalition seat in New South Wales and the ACT, which is some suggestion could go to the Greens?
Well, I think that that's the really critical seat is going to be for us to watch now in the ACT, with my colleague Gary Humphries under huge pressure, not preferenced by anyone, and obviously the Greens will do extremely well in the ACT. That could see the one-seat majority go on the resumption of Parliament. Wouldn't have to wait till July. I'm very hopeful still that we'll hold in New South Wales, and my colleague Maurice Payne will hold off a strong challenge from Kerry Nettle.
Senator Coonan, thank you very much.
Throughout the night, Late Line's Tony Jones will be crisscrossing the continent by satellite, talking with candidates in the key marginal seats. He'll also be sifting through the results and discussing the implications with a range of senior politicians. He's joined now by senior Labor frontbencher and party strategist Stephen Smith and Coalition Minister Peter McGauran.
Stephen Smith, I know you as a cautious person, but as I understand it, you want to make a big prediction right now.
Well, Tony, my attitude is this. If Labor doesn't win this election, I'm going to feel so bad that making a big blue on the tally room floor isn't really going to add to it.
It doesn't add to our confidence about your what you're about to tell us.
Well, because I think my view is pretty firmly based. I think Labor will certainly get more than 50% of the vote. I think we've got to find the 16 seats. I think there are 12 seats which in the blink of an eye will go to Labor. And then there's a raft of seats where we've got to find another 4, and because the swing to Labor is not so strong in the West, we've got to probably find 6 or 8. And my own instinct is Labor had a very good second last week of the campaign, and the Liberals had a terrible last week of the campaign. I don't know that we can rely upon the News poll or the Galaxy polls which came out in the last couple of days. I think the AC Nelson poll was too high. I think Labor's real vote is somewhere around 53, maybe 54%. We need 53% two-party preferred nationally to win, to overcome the incumbency. My entry in the sweepstake is we'll have a net win of 20 seats. That Labor will win 20 seats, maybe 22, maybe 25 at the outset. And so I think that we're going to win this election campaign. Now, that's as you say, you know, a bold, maybe a courageous prediction. But I think Kevin Rudd had a very good campaign. In the campaign, he had to persuade the Australian people that they could hand it over to him with safety and assurity. And I think he did that in spades.
Let's go to Peter McGorran. Very brave, bold prediction. He's saying Labor's going to win. He's even naming the seats. Do you want to make any predictions yourself?
Oh, I think Stephen's getting carried away with election night fever. It is true to say that sadly we will lose valued colleagues and friends tonight, but I don't believe it will be so many as to cost us government. We're all conditioned to look at these 16 fabled marginal seats, but in actual fact, 4 of them I believe we will hold. Bennelong, the Prime Minister, Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull, and Stirling and Hasluck in WA. In fact, I believe those 2 seats will increase our vote. There's another 2 of those 16 we've got a strong possibility of holding. Eden Monero, because of Gary Nairn's good work on the ground, 3.3%, and Solomon...
Not looking good on the exit polls, it has to say.
Yeah, I agree. If we're going to stake our predictions and our future on the exit polls like we have Nielsen, we might as well all go home now. But Solomon's, one of the 16, is based on Darwin. Very good local member, David Tollner, 2.9%. You've got to look beyond the 16 where we can hold the line at all those seats at around the 5, 6 and 7% mark.
All right, you're a Victorian. We're going to be sweating on figures coming from Victoria reasonably soon, from Tasmania, New South Wales and Victoria. There are a number of marginals there, around 5%. If the swing is above that, Victorian Liberal seats will go to Labor.
And that would be a very serious situation for the government. We must hold them all in Victoria. As a Victorian, I believe we will. Deakin, Latrobe, McMillan, and to a lesser extent Corangamite are the ones in the sights of the Labor Party. Excellent members. You've got to understand, we haven't woken up over the last 6 weeks and seen this coming. We've been working for this for 3 years, but most pointedly over the last 12 months. Foxhole by foxhole, we're defending them.
All right, we'll come back to you later. Thanks to both of you, gentlemen.
Kevin Rudd has chosen Queensland's iconic rugby league headquarters at Lang Park in Brisbane to establish his headquarters for the night. But by the time the count in Queensland starts to reveal itself, he'll have a very good idea, like the rest of us, of the way the votes are flowing south of the border. Jim Middleton, who's been covering national politics for the ABC for 20 years and who has immersed himself again in this campaign, is at Lang Park right now. Jim, what is the mood?
I've never seen a Labor camp more confident, both here and nationally. And I can tell you that the last tracking polls conducted by the ALP on Friday night had Labor ahead by 54 to 46, with a big result for them, they're saying, in New South Wales, probably 7 seats at least, and also doing well in South Australia and Tasmania, where they expect to regain 2 seats in Tasmania, pick up 3 in South Australia, and possibly also the seats of Boothby and Sturt in Adelaide. In Western Australia, it's a different story. That's the one soft spot, according to the ALP. They could possibly lose Cowan based on the figures that they've been getting through the campaign. And Victoria is a bit of a dark spot. They don't think that they put quite enough money in there. But with those numbers, Labor is very confident. On the other hand, the Liberal camp has been quite gloomy, and insiders are telling the ABC that it will be very, very difficult for them to win tonight. They pointed to such things as the fact that John Howard lost the incumbency factor, a great benefit to government during the year and during the campaign. And they say, insiders are telling the ABC, that this means that seats, even like Grey in South Australia and Leichhardt here in Queensland, will actually now have to be regarded as marginal rather than as solid Liberal seats. With me now is the ALP's Queensland Secretary, Milton Dick. Now, people have been expecting very big things here in Queensland from the ALP. I've been told by ALP sources something like 6 to 8 seats up here. Is that your reading of the situation?
Look, polls are yet to close here in Queensland, but out there on the hustings today there was a very positive mood, a very upbeat mood amongst our candidates, and certainly the response our booth workers were getting, in particular responding to Kevin Rudd's message of new leadership for Queensland and Australia.
And how is it playing, say, take the states bit by bit? Brisbane, first of all, is that where you think you'll do best? And does it ease off as you get further away from Brisbane?
Well, look, our candidates are out earning every single vote right up until 6 o'clock. Kevin Rudd made it clear that he wanted all of our candidates earning every single vote. Winning seats in Queensland is very difficult. It's like climbing Mount Everest twice because the margins are so high, those incumbency factors. So we've got a tough job ahead of us trying to make inroads into some of of these seats, but certainly the mood today was very positive, very responsive to Kevin Rudd's new leadership message, and we're waiting now until the polls close until 6 p.m. and our candidates are out there earning every single vote.
If you do win today, what will it have been that did it for the ALP?
I think without a doubt here in Queensland it has been the fact that Kevin Rudd, who is a born and bred Queenslander, someone who knows Queensland, who's raised his family here, has been able to respond to the needs, I guess, of Queenslanders and people who understand that he does have a plan for the future, and Queenslanders who are looking for strong leadership for our future.
Now, you only hold currently 6 of the 29 seats here in Queensland at the moment. Do you think that there was an anti-Latham factor in that, and that naturally will turn back to you this time?
Look, our primary vote has been very low in Queensland for many years. Our primary vote has sunk to 34%. We are at a low level, so it is a tough ask marching into some of these seats, but our candidates, alongside with Kevin Rudd, have been out every single day outlining those plans. We aren't taking anything for granted, and we're working hard right up until 6 p.m.
Well, you're not going through the seats, but I'll go through a few for you, and you can say whether you think they're going to go or not. Bonner, Blair, Herbert, Longman, Morton and Petrie. Are those target seats for you? Have you got high hopes there?
Well, in Queensland, we only have 2 seats below the national target 5% range. We're chasing seats further up the pendulum at 7, 8, 9, 10%. That task is huge. It cannot be underestimated of how difficult it is to march into those seats and convert those votes back to Labor. But we are giving it every single chance that we can, because we know Queensland is so important to the state of play of a future Rudd Labor government.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Dick. We'll talk to you a bit later on.
Now we might we'll follow up a little on some of those seats that Jim has been talking about, but first we do have some figures in. Anthony, they may not be meaningful, but let's just get a sense of them anyway.
Oh, we got the first figure in from Eden Monero, and it was
this is our famous bellwether seat, Eden Monero.
Right. It was only 1.4% swing to Labor, which is not enough to win the seat. But it was Perisher Valley, and the votes were 8, 4, 2 and 1. So it's why we're not actually calling up any results
You're not going to make a call on that? Well, I'm actually reassured. Now, Queensland, as we've said, was always going to be a strong state to deliver for Labor, for them to have any chance of winning government. Now, in looking at the seats we will be wanting to watch tonight, there are 3 that are very marginal, and if there's any swing on at all, you would expect them to go quickly, right?
Well, the first seats call are Bonner and Morton, and then we also have Bowman, which is slightly safer, but has had some problems. The candidate had some problems with some police investigations, which is sort of built into the campaign. But beyond them, there's a number of seats which are getting on the edges of Brisbane and further out. There's Blair, which is based around Ipswich. It was very much similar to the seat that Pauline Hanson actually won in 1996. It's very similar now to the modern Blair. And Cameron Thompson will be battling hard to hold that seat against Shane Newman. Further up north, we've got Herbert, which is almost entirely based on the Townsville metropolitan area. Peter Lindsay up against George Colbrand for Labor. And then we have Longman, where Mal Brough, it's got a margin of 6.7%. Mal Brough up against John Sullivan, a former state member.
And in that case, 6.7% to defend, and defended by a very high-profile minister over the past year, particularly in the last few months, because he has overseen the intervention in the Northern Territory. So one would expect that if that has tended to be a popular issue, the question is, if there is a significant swing on, how much of it can he hold back in his own seat?
It is one of a number of seats where there was a large swing against Labor last time. The question is how much that was specific to the 2004 campaign.
Okay, Julia Gillard, it's true, isn't it, that Labor is very serious, not only about seats like Herbert, Longman, Blair, Petrie and others, but also a seat like Ford in the south of Brisbane, I think it is, 11%. Are you seriously contemplating the possibility that Labor could pick up Ford with a swing like that?
We are performing very well in Brisbane. All of our material tells us that. So I think it's partly the Queensland factor, partly the interest rate factor and partly work choices. So I'd be keeping an eye on Ford. It's a very different seat, but I'd also be keeping an eye on Dawson. The government member there is Deanne Kelly. It's shifting demographically. The resources boom is bringing more working people into that seat, and I think the work choices factor is going to tell there. So we're looking for gains in Brisbane. We've got to bust above the 5% swing line to have realistic gains in Queensland. There's only 2 seats that are easy pickups. All the rest are sizable above 5% swings, but we think the Queensland factor and the other issues are going to play well.
Nick mentioned it must send a shudder down your spine to hear, and we know the politicking over, and this is
not quite.
This is real talk here.
Yet, Kerry.
But it must send a shiver down your spine to contemplate that Labor's seriously looking at a seat like Ford with 11%.
Well, can I just say about Queensland? Of course, it's been a disaster zone for Labor for a long time, and a great state for us. But that's part of the problem. We're starting from a very high base. We got 57% two-party preferred last time, a swing of 2% to us. So in a sense, if there's going to be a correction, it's likely to be at this election. The other thing that worries me about Queensland is that there's been a redistribution, an extra seat put into the state, boundaries all shifted, and all these figures are based on last election's numbers with different members, different boundaries. So in a sense, you're flying a bit blind. The seat of Blair, for example, has had its margin cut in half and taken in a big chunk of Ipswich. So Blair is going to be one to watch tonight. And I'm also worried where we've lost sitting members, of course, in Leichhardt and Ford, where you lose sitting members and good sitting members like Kay Elson and Warren Ench. You've really got to watch those seats. So it's going to be an interesting state tonight.
Certainly will be, and of course the polls don't close there for another half hour or so. John Howard is sticking with recent Liberal tradition tonight. He's chosen Sydney's Wentworth Hotel as his base, where he's previously celebrated 4 Liberal victories in a row. He must be on absolute tenterhooks tonight. Will he be delivering yet another victory speech or saying farewell after nearly 12 years of government? ABC reporter Lee Sales is at the Wentworth now. Lee Sales, how would you describe the mood there? And are you picking up any feedback?
Well, it's pretty subdued at the moment, Kerry, because police just cleared the room to go through with sniffer dogs. As you'd imagine, there's pretty heavy security here. The Prime Minister himself is at Kirribilli at the moment watching the coverage on television, and it'll probably be around 9 o'clock or so tonight before he even thinks about coming to the Wentworth. He's spent most of the day in Bennelong visiting booths, and in fact he was doing that right up until about 5:30, so not wasting a minute to get out there to try to get every vote he possibly needs. I'm told that he's feeling fairly confident, that he believes that the momentum in the past week has moved his way, and that the election is still within grasp for him.
Lee, it's one thing to try and pick the mood early in the night, I know, but what have you been picking up over the course of the day?
Look, I think that, as I said, on the Liberal side, there is a little bit of a pessimism, I suppose, about things, but at the same time, this sense that the polls that have come out in the past couple of days, the Galaxy poll and the News poll, do give them a feeling that perhaps right at the end they have had a little bit of momentum coming their way. So I think it's a pessimism, but just tinged with a slight hope that perhaps John Howard can pull a miracle out of the bag for them and confound what everyone's basically expected through the campaign, which is that, and indeed most of the year, that Kevin Rudd is going to win.
Thanks very much for that, Lee, and we'll be back to you later in the evening. Thanks. And I'm going to just cut back to Julia Gillard here because she tells me that she's got some figures in from Braddon.
I've got a very early booth in Braddon. It's 5.2% swing to Labor. It's the booth of Morley. It's only 117 votes. But of course, Braddon is an interesting seat for us. We lost it last time. Our candidate, Sid Sidebottom, is running for it again. It's the site of the Mersey Hospital, so the government has focused on it a great deal. But that's a very good sign for us from an early figure.
Have you got any sense of that booth, the nature of the booth?
Look, I think it's probably a timber-affected booth, and I would expect to see some returns back to us in booths that are timber community affected.
Okay. A short drive from Parliament House and across the border in New South Wales, the electorate of Eden Monaro is almost the ultimate litmus test seat. In 14 elections since 1972, the party that has won Eden Monaro has won government. It's been held for the Liberals by Special Minister of State Gary Nairn since 1996, when John Howard came to power, with a margin there of just over 3%. He has a formidable Labor opponent, this time in Defence Force lawyer and Iraq veteran Colonel Mike Kelly. ABC reporter Julie Doyle has spent the day in Queanbeyan talking with voters, and she's with Tony Jones.
Hi Julie, what are you picking up?
Well, this has been a very difficult election for voters in Eden Monaro. It's a difficult choice because what they're faced with is the Labor candidate Mike Kelly, who's come into this seat and had to get his head around all the issues. It's such a diverse electorate. He seems to have done that, and he's run a very strong campaign on the impact of work choices. But on the other hand, there's Gary Nan, who's been the local member here for 11 years, and it's pretty hard to get anybody to say a bad word about Gary Nan. He's very popular and the voters feel that he's done a very good job. So they're faced with this interesting dilemma of, do they vote against a local member who they feel doesn't deserve to lose his seat, but do they go for Labor because they want a change of government? So there's a lot of people in this seat that were still undecided yesterday and even up until this morning.
Julie, you're right about Gary Nan. In fact, he spent an enormous amount of money in the seat, government money that is, public money, during the course of this campaign. It's actually hard for people to vote against that kind of largesse, and yet we're seeing already an exit poll from that seat showing Labor ahead by a large amount, by 16 points, 58 to 42. I mean, that does indicate, the exit poll at least, a strong feeling flowing towards Mike Kelly. Are you picking that up at all?
Look, as I said, I've been picking up a little bit of both, that people are still undecided. Some people want to go with Gary Nan because of his track record, and other people, particularly on the issue of work choices, wanted to go with Mike Kelly. Now, the polls up until recently were showing that Labor is still ahead in this seat, so you think that is some indication. But whether Gary Nan can get across the line because of his popularity as a local member remains to be seen. But you're right about all the emphasis that's gone into this seat. A lot of the local councillors have been saying to me it's a great time for election time in Eden Monaro because they do get a lot of funding. We've seen millions of dollars in announcements for roads and water and community facilities, and every time that one of the parties has made a funding commitment, the other one has come out and at least matched it or tried to better it. So it has been a lot of attention on this seat for sure.
Julie Doyle, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Now we're going to start getting into some seats here, but there are some figures that are starting to get a little bit interesting. I'll just get Anthony to put us in the picture a bit.
Yeah, I'm seeing a swing of 6.6% to Labor in Braddon. I'm seeing a swing of 7% to Labor in Macquarie, which is a seat it notionally holds at the moment, but is marginal. In Page, a swing of 12% in 4 booths to Labor. So that's a dramatic swing in that election.
What percentage of votes, Anthony, and how significant?
That's 0.5%. I can tell you it's the booths, Barryugal, Rappville, Southgate and Gundarimba South. That's 4 booths, 12% swings, pretty remarkable.
Now, if Labor is in the hunt for a seat like Page, that's over 6%, isn't it?
Yes, that's certainly, yes.
Okay, well, we're going to take a look at Eden Monaro since we've just been talking about it. Can we pull Eden Monaro up and have a look at what figures we have there?
Yes, we'll see where Gary Nan's up against Mike Kelly for the Labor Party. We've got 0.5% of the vote counted. We have 5 booths, Durangle, Numarella, Toamba, Jingallic. They're all booths under 150 votes. Gary Nan's ahead, 46.8 to 39.9. If on the preference count in those 5 booths, we're seeing a swing of 0.6% with the Liberal Party ahead. At this stage, that's not enough to decide the seat. We're still
it's also a fairly complicated seat, isn't it? It sort of covers various demographics across the...
In fact, I've just had an update and the swing's now looking like 5.9%.
Wow.
So in fact that...
with how many counted?
That's with some preference counts with those five booths. So it's the same booths, but we've got a preference count suddenly then. So on the preference count, it could be that the swing to Labor is actually larger than the estimate that I had there.
Okay. So how do you read that at this early stage? That is a seat that could well fall to Labor.
It's a seat where Labor is leading.
Yeah. Okay. One man's future, whose future hangs in the balance tonight is Peter Costello. Win or lose, the Treasurer will almost certainly be the next leader of the Liberal Party as Prime Minister in 18 months or so from now if the Coalition wins tonight, or as Leader of the Opposition very soon if they don't. Peter Costello will be watching results from St Andrew's Uniting Church in Glen Iris in Melbourne until a result is known and his future becomes clearer. Heather Hewitt is at St Andrews now. Heather, what information have you picked up there?
Well, Peter Costello is certainly not watching here at the moment. I'm assuming that he's at home. He's not expected here till about 9 p.m. this evening. This is a gathering for booth workers and volunteers from today and I think from the course of the campaign. As you can see, it's not exactly a rollicking party yet, but numbers are expected to build up later and the bar has been set up. I have spoken, though, to close colleagues of Peter Costello's in the course of this afternoon. I think it's fair to say there is no expectation of a Liberal victory tonight. Absolutely no expectation whatsoever. Those are the close colleagues of his that I've spoken to. The attention then turns to what happens next. My understanding is that Peter Costello does definitely want to be opposition leader and he would expect to be elected unopposed, but he won't be talking about that tonight. That will unfold tomorrow or the next day.
Heather, in talking to those people close to the Treasurer, did they expand or elaborate at all on where they felt where the states were or the seats were that were going to contribute to their defeat?
No, they didn't go into that sort of detail. There was just a general feeling that the Liberals were headed for defeat. Some go further than others. Some are saying landslides, some say it could be closer than that, but certainly no expectation of a victory.
OK, Heather, well, no doubt we'll be back in the seat of Higgins later tonight, particularly when the Treasurer appears. Thanks for that. And
thank you.
We're now going to follow up on Julia Gillard's information a little bit earlier. This is the Canberra Flies, the great Australian salute. The seat of Braddon, Anthony, we might take a closer look at this. This is one of two Liberal seats in Tasmania that Labor is hoping to win, two very marginal seats.
Well, this is where Mark Baker won this, defeating Sid Sidebottom at the last election. Sid had held the seat since 1998, was defeated by Mark Baker in the follow-on from the logging decision. Now, on those figures, Mark Baker is ahead, but we have a preference count in 5 of the 74 booths, and we're actually predicting a 3.7% swing to Labor at this stage, in which case that would turn into a Labor gain. Now, it's actually holding off on calling at the moment. We've got the Labor Party in doubt, but ahead in that seat. So that's one we'll be coming back to during the evening. OK, now the seat of McMillan in eastern Victoria. This is held by Russell Broadbent. He's had a couple of goes in and out of the Parliament. This time he's been in just for the one term since 2004. He has a margin of 5%, which would normally be reasonably safe. With only 0.8% of the vote counted. What is it telling us? Well, Russell Broadbent is, as we said, has been in a number of times. He's well ahead on these figures, but there are a lot of small rural booths that come in first, and that's what's indicated in those percentages. But when we factor in where the information is from, and we've got 6 of the 82 primary booths, 4 of the 82 with preferences, there's a 1% swing to Labor. So on first figures, that's marking it down as a Liberal retain. Now, again, I think that's something we'd come back to a little bit later. If he's re-elected, it would be the first time he's ever been re-elected to Parliament. OK, the seat of Robertson on the New South Wales Central Coast. The Liberals have held this seat with Jim Lloyd since 1996. He currently enjoys a margin of 6.9%, and with only 0.7% of the vote counted, it's showing up quite a substantial swing to Labor. Quite a substantial, and at this stage we've got Jim Lloyd on 297 to Belinda Neal 227. We've got quite a vote there for the Greens at this stage, so I'm not quite sure where that booth has come from. But once again, we're factoring in the booths and the preferences. We've got a 1 preference booth count, which is indicating a 6.5% swing. I've got an 8.3% swing on slightly later figures, but at this stage, that is a seat which is undecided at this stage, and Labor is just ever so slightly ahead. And I'd point out that in neighbouring Dobell at this stage, there is a quite enormous swing. Dobell is the 16th seat to fall if there's a fall tonight. And neighbouring Dobell has a swing of 8% at the moment. So there's an 8% swing there on the Central Coast. OK, Nick Minchin, are you picking anything up yet?
Well, we just apparently got a booth in Bass with 0.7% of the vote showing no swing at all in Bass. Right. So Bass is going to be an interesting seat because neither side really knows how this pulp mill is going to play out.
So it's entirely possible that you could do not so well in Braddon.
That's right.
But OK in Bass.
Well, we got a huge swing to us in Braddon last time, so there's sort of room to fall back. Whereas Bass, I think the way this pulp mill plays out might well see Michael Ferguson hold that seat.
Some of those early New South Wales figures are looking a bit ominous.
Well, the Central Coast has always been a nervous situation for us, both Robertson and Dobell. They're mortgage belt seats, they're lower income seats. They're very good members, but it's an area that really is volatile. So I think they're seats to watch tonight.
Yeah, the thing to watch out for in Bass, and I think it's going to make it unpredictable off the early figures, is there will be a very sizable Green vote there. I would anticipate well into 2 figures, and it will be the eventual landing of that Green vote in circumstances where they haven't recommended a vote for either Liberal or Labor.
And the reason they haven't is because you both supported the Tories.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But our candidate there, Jodie Campbell, I think she is a good candidate, so it's one to watch. My numbers on Dobell agree with Anthony's, so we've got an 8% swing there, and we're talking about a very sizable booth that's been counted. It's more than 1,000 votes, so I think that's possibly more representative than some of the early numbers we've seen. Robertson, obviously we're dealing off very early numbers, but we were hopeful in Robertson. It's a big swing.
You've been trying to get it back for a long time.
We have been trying to get it back for a long time. It's Belinda Neal's second go, but we are wanting to keep a very close eye on it tonight, and are hopeful it'll be a pickup.
Okay.
Kerry, I think your viewers will be interested. The first booth is in Bennelong, 200 votes, and it's showing no swing whatsoever.
Do you know what booth?
I don't know what
and how
booth,
significant.
sorry,
Okay, well we might try and keep an eye on and have a closer look at Bennelong in a moment. But Fran Kelly is on the tally room floor with one of the most astute political observers here in this very crowded tally room tonight, and that's Craig Rucastle from The Chaser.
Craig Rucastle, what do you make of the mood in this room? The public are queuing up outside trying to get in this.
Extraordinary. I'm not sure if they just heard about Kerry's ceremonial strip at the end of every election, but there is a queue down the road in Canberra. Like literally the whole of Canberra is here. It is quite extraordinary. It's like there's some kind of Britney concert on out here. So it's an amazing mood here. And people seem to be, quite mad and boneheading and ridiculous, so that's a good sign for democracy.
As Kerry said, you're an astute reader of the mood of the electorate.
Exactly. Yeah.
What have you been, how do you read? I know the Chaser boys have been out covering almost every electorate in the country this week, today already. What are you picking up?
Look, you only have to read Ed Monero, I think, because that's the bellwether seat. That's all we actually read. We don't look at any of the other polls, and I think with 0.5% in there, I'm willing to call this election for Labor. But also, just to be on the safe side, with 0.5% of the vote in it, Ed Monero, I'm willing to call this election for Liberals. But I am quite confident, I must admit, having looked at the figures, I'm not going to call it for the Democrats just to be on the safe side, okay?
We're at the business end of the night now, that's for sure, but it's been a long campaign, there's been a lot of highs and a lot of lows. What's the high point of the campaign in your view?
Gee, the high point for me, look, it's been Tony Abbott's performance. I mean, it's a long campaign. It went, John Howard called it early. A lot of people said, can you keep up the stuff up throughout the whole campaign to Tony Abbott? And he did well, and I thought that was a high point for me. Being berated by the Prime Minister was a high point for me as well. And look, I think the fact that the Labor Party kept Kevin charged each night, kept the new batteries in Kevin each night, it did really well there. I thought he was going to run out towards the end. Might have to bring in a new robot, but...
Why do you think it is, if the voters do turn on the coalition tonight, do you think it is simply the it's time factor? Is that what you're picking up?
Look, I think it's the fact that they're very confused who's who in this election and which to go for. A younger version of Howard. Look, I think if they vote in Kevin Rudd, they've got another 11 years of him, they figure, look, we're going to have the same thing forever, pretty much. It's taken a while for Labor to manufacture a new jazzier, younger John Howard, but I think it could mean that's the reason they're going for him in the end. But look, I don't know what it is. I think it's not just it's time. It's an underlying deep hatred of John Howard as well. I think that's just coming through there. But it's amazing. I still, despite my calls earlier, I'm not willing. I don't know which way it's going to go. I mean, you can never tell.
No swing in Bennelong yet, but if the coalition, if Labor gets up tonight, the biggest loser, you'd have to say, would be Peter Costello, bridesmaid. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
No, it is amazing. Look, the amazing thing I've found from this campaign is no one's talked about the fact that Howard could lose and the Libs could still win. Peter Costello could be Prime Minister tomorrow. I better call that actually. With 0.5% called in Edinburgh, Peter Costello is the Prime Minister, people.
Craig Rucastle, thank you very much.
I think I've covered it all.
Just so that, Fran, you get a guarantee from Craig that he stays on the outside looking in tonight. Let's take another look at some figures that we've got from Bennelong. Nick Minchin had one booth that wasn't showing any movement either way. This is the Prime Minister's own seat in Sydney. Anthony, what have you got?
I got one booth, which is Royal Ride Homes, which is I think from memory, is one of the best Liberal booths in the electorate, and it's showing a 10% swing is my estimate, but he's only one booth, and being a retirement homes, it's not very indicative of the rest of the electorate. But still, in a retirement home, to see a 10% swing against the Liberal Party in Bennelong is a bit of a surprise.
Nick?
Well, it's, as Andy says, a very small booth and a retirement home. I think it's a bit early to call that.
Yeah.
I've just been told the votes counted so far, Australia-wide, which is really the eastern states, 3.9% swing to Labor overall, but 6.6 in safe Labor seats. And that's one of the phenomena we might see tonight, that Labor gets big swings in its own seats, but that doesn't translate. And that's going to be something we're going to watch tonight. But on the early count, 3.9 won't win them government. It'll get them a bunch of seats, but not 16.
Tell me, Nick, which of your marginal seats did you decide you were going to put the biggest, thickest wall around?
Well, Braddon would have had to have been one of them, Nick, wouldn't it, with the Mersey?
Fairly obvious start.
You're giving up North Sydney.
Well, obviously those seats with sitting members that we think can hold those seats, in the various states. And Western Australia's been great for us, that looks good. South Australia with 3 marginal seats below 1% has been very tough. We've worked hard, but they're going to be tough tonight. Victoria, look, we all our assumptions are we hold the line in Victoria. I just got some figures in for Latrobe, 1.4% counted, there's no swing. So I'm optimistic Latrobe will be all right. Then, of course, Bass and Braddon, where they were great wins last time, 2 terrific new members. We really want to hold them.
Okay, now we're going to have a seat run in a second, but Julie, have you got any updated information quickly?
I've got one extraordinary booth in McEwen in Christmas Hills where we've got 72% on the 2PP, but I'm not sure how representative that is. It's in Yarra Glen, so they might have been having some of that famous wine.
Okay, we're going to start this seat run with the seat of Bennelong, the Prime Minister's own seat in Western Sydney.
Well, we'll see these figures here. This is still the Ride Homes booth I was talking about. There we are, John Howard holds this with a margin of 4.1% up against Maxine McHugh from the Labor Party. Running a very vigorous Labor campaign in this election. These are small votes, 101 to 80, 7.9% there with the Greens. But as I said, this was a booth that voted 64% Liberal last time after preferences. So we know that it's from that booth, and we're estimating that there's actually a 10% swing in that booth. Now, I am not going to go... I'm not...
They're looking for action out the back. But we're not going to encourage them. It could get ugly.
I'm not calling that seat, I must say. Right. Let's say that is one booth. We cannot call that seat.
No, obviously not.
So we'll have to let the people behind us quieten down a minute.
We might take a look at the seat of Flinders. This is Melbourne's southeast rural fringe. It runs down the peninsula. It's held by the Liberals for Greg Hunt with a very safe margin normally of 11.1%. 0.9% of the vote counted, a slight swing to Labor.
Yes, well, Greg Hunt's been in this since Peter Reith retired in 2001. He's well ahead on the primaries, but this is again an electorate with the smaller booths are always from the country areas, and Greg Hunt's ahead at this stage. We believe that after the distribution of preferences, we're looking at a 2.7% swing, 3 of the 57 booths, and on those figures, Greg Hunt would go on to be returned after succeeding Peter Reith in 2001.
Okay, the seat of Gilmore on the New South Wales south coast. Joanna Gash came in when the Prime Minister, when John Howard formed a government in 1996. She holds it on a margin of 9.4%, and with 2% of the vote counted.
She's got at this stage, she's got 44.4. I'm either interested that none of the above is running 5th at this stage with 17 votes, which is one of my favourite candidates this election. But Joanna Gash, she's behind on the primary votes on these figures. I hadn't actually looked at the numbers closely enough. There's a 9.8% swing on this seat's in doubt. So that's actually based on 1 2-candidate preferred booth at Hyams Beach. So I'd be a little more cautious about calling that. That's only 1 booth with preferences. But that's a significant swing in a seat that the Coalition won in 1996.
But she does hold it with a margin of 11, I think, doesn't she?
That's right, so that one's close at this stage.
But nonetheless, we're also looking at what these things might indicate about other seats in New South Wales. We'll jump to Victoria now, the seat of Corangamite in southern Victoria, partly around Geelong and then heading west from there. This has been held by Stuart MacArthur for a very long time, since 1984, requires a swing of 5.3%.
Well, he's ahead on the primary votes at this stage, 1,200 to 959. That's 50.1 to 38.9. But this is a preference count in 5 of the 65 booths that I'm looking at. And it's showing a swing of 6.7% to the Labor Party, 5.8, that's got one less booth in those numbers. It's calling it in doubt. I've got it in doubt on slightly later figures at this stage. That's undecided. We'll be counting in Corangamite for quite a while yet.
OK, now we'll come back to Tasmania and take a look at another look at that seat of Bass. There's just about 2% of the vote counted. This is held for the Liberal Party by Michael Ferguson only since 2004. He's on a margin of 2.6%, and this, of course, is the seat of the Gunns pulp mill.
And this is where Jodie Campbell's the Deputy Mayor of Launceston. She's far behind, but these booths all come from the small forestry towns up in the northeast corner. The Greens are polling well in this electorate, even far away from Launceston. And at this stage, we're factoring in the booths, and it's showing a 2.8% swing, which puts Labor just slightly ahead at this stage with a preference count in 4 of the 50 booths.
And Jodie Campbell, the Labor candidate in Bassett, the Launceston RSL, joins us right now. How are things going from your point of view? We've seen what is a 2.8% swing on only 2% of the vote counted. It's not a very big swing to you, you'd have to say.
No, look, and I think it's a little too early to tell as yet. The booths closed at 6 o'clock, and I guess we'll see what will happen in due course.
Do you have any idea what's happening in booths that you know about that we don't?
Well, look, it was very positive out there today. In fact, people were still talking about the issues that matter to them, the issues which are health, certainly education, and about putting fairness and flexibility back into the workplace. People were still talking about them. They've spoken to me about those issues since I was pre-selected at the end of January, even up until 6 o'clock tonight when the booths were closed. So, as I've said, the booths, they closed at 6 o'clock, and it's a little too early to tell. We just have to wait and see.
Do you get a sense at all of how the pulp mill is playing there, Jodie? I mean, and are you expecting, in fact, a large preference coming to you from the Greens?
Well, look, I've said this many times now that out in my community that there really are a whole range of views when it comes to the pulp mill. People that support the pulp mill and also people that don't support the pulp mill as well. Federal Labor, we've always supported a pulp mill that was environmentally sustainable. We certainly supported that in the past and will continue to support that way into the future.
You're one of many Labor candidates with a union pedigree. The government's made a great deal out of how many of you come from the union movement, are union organisers. You are yourself. Are you getting any sort of feeling as to whether that's played against you?
Well, look, I'm really proud of being a member of a legal organisation and, in fact, a union member who has stood up for the rights of working people. I'm really proud of that fact, and I will always be proud of that.
Now, Labor's Michelle O'Byrne held onto this seat twice, only to lose it in the Latham backlash. Do you think your electorate is going to have short enough memories to turn around and vote for the ALP again after voting you out just 3 years ago?
Well, look, when it comes to forestry, we support the RFA, we support the Community Forest Agreement, but we also support sustainable forestry into the future. That's where we are with that.
You are expecting it to be tight, though, are you? It's tight early on. Are there booths coming in which you are counting on to bring it, bring the swing up, bring it higher?
Well, look, I've been campaigning now for 10 months. It's been 10 hard months of campaigning. I'm campaigning in a marginal seat. We have 16 marginal seats to win if we are to form government. It's certainly a big task. The booths closed at 6 o'clock tonight, and I'll be waiting for a result.
OK, Jodie Campbell, we'll leave you there. We may have to come back to you once there are more numbers in that seat. Thank you.
OK, well, the numbers are starting to build a little, and we're continuing to hear in from Labor and Coalition scrutineers. Julia Gillard, you've got some fresh figures?
Yeah, I've got 6.1% swing in Eden Monero. That's off 9 booths, more than 1,000 votes. But the interesting thing there is they would be the smaller booths. We would be expecting to go well in the bigger booths when you've come to Queanbeyan and the metro areas. Corangamite, I've got 3 early booths, once again outliers, more than 1,000 votes in total. That's giving us a 12% swing. So we've if we're swinging to us strongly in the outliers in Corangamite, that's going to be one to watch. Bendigo, which of course is held by our Steve Gibbons, we've got one country booth, and that's giving us a 5.5% swing to us. So that's very good news for solidifying Bendigo.
And right.
That's the booth of Epiloc.
Yep.
And the Coalition did target in on Bendigo. That's been the favoured destination for Coalition ministers, so they don't seem to have made any headway.
I think it was always optimistic to think we could win seats from Labor in Victoria, given our good performance in 2004.
But you had
it was
to
a matter
at
of
least go
holding
through
the
the
line.
motions.
But, you know, you've got to keep Labor Party honest and give them a go. Yeah. As I said before, there's some interesting numbers coming in Franklin. I think Franklin might be a seat worth watching. They're early, but they're showing an actual swing to the Liberal Party in Franklin.
So this is
and
this is a Labor seat, and the sitting member has how do you put it?
Had some colourful
left the seat.
Some colourful
Had
issues.
some issues.
Yes, but I'll say colourful and you say issues, and we can put them together. Colourful issues.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on Franklin as we get into the night. But we might slip across to Tony Jones with his panellists.
Okay, Peter McGoran, you must be a little bit nervous about Corangamite. 6.3% swing now to the ALP with more than 3% counted.
Certainly Stuart MacArthur, the local members, under the pump there, but I'm very encouraged by the fact that the other seats in Victoria look good for us, and I think Corangamite will be held. Look, from the snippets from outlying booths and small ones and all the variables, it's too early to read, to convincingly call one seat or another, but what you can say with certainty is there's no landslide. This is trench warfare, this is seat by seat. I now believe the government will win narrowly, and I think Stephen Smith should revise his 20-seat majority down to a narrow win if he still believes they're in the game.
Well, do you want to go back to a narrow win?
I'm happy to revise up.
Revise up?
I'm happy to revise up. I think the range will be 20 to 25. Now, look at what we've seen so far. Very strong. Yeah, of course, it's early days, and I made the brave and bold, some would say cautious prediction.
You did, Mr. Cautious Stephen Smith, as we've come to know you, no longer cautious.
There's nothing I've seen which belies it so far. Look at what we know. Firstly, very strong swings in the New South Wales seats. Dobell, Eden Monero. I've got some scrutiny advice on Lindsay which says the same. And those three plus Parramatta are the four that I count automatically. Strong swings in Page and Robertson. The Central Coast is going well. Page, where there's a retiring national member.
How well in Page and Robertson?
Well, last figure I had, with 2,500 counted, it was a 15% swing to Labor. In Victoria, Corangamite, I agree with Peter, it is early days, but I think Corangamite is the one that will win first in Victoria. And then Baden and Brass, the swings on the primary vote look lower, and so we'll have to pay careful attention to those, but nothing that I've seen yet would cause me to worry about the entry I put in the sweepstake on Thursday night, which was a 20-seat Labor victory.
But what you should be worried about...
20-seat Labor win.
What you should be worried about is that we're still debating the future of Bass and Braddon and a number of other marginal seats. These were the seats that Stephen and everybody else believed would disappear by 6:30pm. We're still got a live chance in a number of those marginals that everyone had written off.
It's true, Stephen Smith. I mean, would you not have expected a higher swing already in Bass and Braddon?
The primary looks like it's down a bit. I would like to take a careful look at the Greens and the distribution of Greens preferences, because certainly in those two seats you've got the prospect of people voting on the mill and going for a larger vote for the Greens. The Greens haven't distributed an allocation of preferences, so that'll be left to people to make their own judgments without the aid of agreeing how to vote. Yes, the primary vote looks like it's a bit down, but there's nothing I've seen yet which would cause us to be concerned about any of those Tasmanian seats. I think the key thing at the moment is a strong vote in New South Wales, and I had Gilmore down as an outside roughie, and there's a strong vote in Gilmore. Robertson, I think, is one of the ones we might pick up. There's a strong Central Coast vote. And Page, I think, again, it's early days, but the retirement of the sitting member does help us. And in terms of Peter's analogy about trench warfare, where you do have the trench warfare, where the sitting member retires, then it makes it easier for the swing to be maximised.
Peter McGoran, of course it is early days. Of course it is early days. But this story that Stephen Smith is telling about what's happening in New South Wales must surely worry you.
No, because we'll win Robertson. Really, Robertson should have been gone by now. Jim Lloyd will win that, and Gilmore, in your dreams, Stephen, you're not getting Gilmore by a long shot. Joanna Gash is too good. So if New South Wales can be kept to the predicted 4 or 5 seats below that magical 5% mark, we'll hold all the others. Look, we're on track.
Let me ask you this. The campaign, will you look back in anger at the way that campaign was conducted if you lose narrowly or by a large amount?
No. We tried many things. It was hard to get traction completely. It wasn't a campaign dominated by one theme or one tactic. I think we've proved versatile and flexible as we had to be. There's a lot of armchair critics looking back with hindsight.
OK, we'll leave you both there for now. Thanks very much.
I should say at this point, normally there'd be a 7 o'clock news on the ABC around Australia, but we are plunging on with our seat counting tonight because we're moving somewhat closer to a point where the picture is becoming clearer. For instance, with 2% of the seat of the vote counted around, bearing in mind we're only talking about New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, but with 2% of the vote counted, we're looking at a 51.8% vote in two-party preferred terms for the Labor Party, 48% for the Coalition. That represents a swing, fascinating as it is, 4.8%, which is right on the margin, right on the cusp of what Labor needs to form a government, theoretically. We should bear in mind, Anthony Green, that doesn't include Queensland, which Labor was expecting to be its best state.
Well, what I want to say is 4.8. We've been seeing the swing between 4 and 5% all night. What that means, that is the point of the pendulum where you can get a possibility of a change of government, but there's no Queensland figures in. If the swing is bigger in Queensland than the southern states, then that swing is going to start going up. We're also seeing very few figures from South Australia yet. So that's what that swing means. What we are seeing at this stage is that we have Labor on track to gain Parramatta, looking like they're going to gain Page and gain Eden-Monaro, but they are behind in Franklin, though the count is very slow in Franklin. And in terms of doubtful seats, what we have, we've got 6 Liberal seats: Robertson, Eden-Monaro, DeBell, Deakin, Braddon and Bennelong, where Labor is currently ahead on the counts. And the only seat where the Liberals are currently ahead in the Labor seat is Isaacs, and there are a significant number of Liberal seats remaining in doubt. So at this stage, the swing is indicating the possibility of a change of government before Queensland, but it is not indicating yet, until we get some Queensland figures, whether there is a change of government. But certainly we're seeing a big enough swing. We're not seeing enough seats fall yet, but we haven't seen Queensland. Okay, and of course South Australia, the birds closed half an hour ago, and in Queensland they have closed just in the last couple of minutes. So somewhere in the next 10 to 15 minutes we'll start to see something meaningful from South Australia, and within the next half hour we'll start to see some real figures, hopefully, from Queensland. Julia Gillard?
I think we should be taking a look at Hume, which would be very unexpected. That's Albie Schultz's seat. Our candidate's David Grant.
Margin.
We've got 2,500 votes counted, showing a 10.8% swing to Labor. Macarthur, we've got more than 3,000 votes counted. We're recording a 10% swing to Labor. That, of course, is Pat Farmer's seat. For McEwen, I've got 3,000 votes counted, showing a 5.5% swing to Labor. And in Corangamite, I've got 4,400, showing a 7.38% swing, all on the 2PP. So they're good results, and putting in the certainly to be followed up by our very great expert here, Hume and Macarthur, worth a look at.
So how are you feeling right now?
Oh, still nervous, Kerry, still nervous.
Not as nervous as Nick, I would think, with Queensland looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Clearly there isn't a sufficient swing yet to say that Labor will win this election. I think we're holding up reasonably well in Victoria. Corangamite is a problem, but Macmillan is actually a small swing to us. Latrobe, the swing against us is only 2%. That's not enough to lose the seat.
Any sense of numbers there, though, in Latrobe, how big the count is?
Yeah, well, Latrobe is on 3% of the vote. Macmillan's on 4% of the vote. And you're getting mixed results out of New South Wales. Patterson, the swing against us is very small, on 5.6% of the vote. So I don't think yet it's clear that there's the sort of swing to Labor that would give them comfort they could win this.
Remembering again, though, that the seats of South Australia and Queensland are still to kick in.
Sure.
So let's keep looking at our seats. We're having a few problems with our graphics at the moment, but we will keep pumping the numbers through, because in the end, graphics or no graphics, it's the numbers that are going to tell the story. Anthony, can we have a look at the seat of Braddon, northwest Tasmania? This is a seat held by the Libs, as I've said before, with a very slender margin of 1.1%. We've now got 11.6% of the vote counted.
Yes, we've got 18 of 74 booths where the two candidate preferred, and we're seeing that the Labor Party is getting a swing of 2.3%, which is enough for Sid Sidebottom to be ahead. That puts him on 51.1%. But Sid Sidebottom is not far enough ahead to give that seat away, but he's got a big enough swing to put him ahead at this stage. And so Sid Sidebottom is on track at this stage to regain Braddon, but he needs more. We'll need to look at more counting in that seat.
Okay, and we'll have a look at the seat of Patterson, but I'll just ask our seat producers if they could maybe do a check on MacArthur and Hume on the basis of what Julia Gillard was telling us a moment ago, while we run through these seats we've got now. Patterson in the New South Wales Hunter region. This is another Liberal seat held with a margin of 6.3% by Bob Baldwin for the last two terms. 13% of the vote counted. Anthony?
Well, we've got 11 of 72 booths with preference counts, and they're showing there is a swing of 4.7% in that seat. And Bob Baldwin is on 51.6. He's ahead, but he's not far enough ahead at this stage to decide that he's actually been elected. So Patterson remains in doubt with a 4.7% swing to Labor.
Okay, now the seat of Parramatta is actually held by the Labor Party, but a redistribution has on paper, theoretically, put it into Liberal hands. On paper, the Liberals have started the count 0.8% ahead. Julie Owens is actually the sitting ALP member.
And at this stage, she's going on to win the seat. We've got a swing of 6.7% occurring in that seat. And Julie Owens at this stage looks set to win the seat. And she does currently hold it, but the redistribution made it marginal Liberal seat.
Okay, can we have a look at the seat of Dunkley in Victoria in the outer southeast of Melbourne? This takes in Frankston also. This has been held by Bruce Bilson since '96 with what would normally be quite a safe margin.
Well, this is a very small count. What I'll in fact do is actually track on to what Julia Gillard was talking about with Hume. We do actually have 12 of 84 booths, and we're seeing a swing of 10.3% in Hume. And in MacArthur, which is, as Julia was saying, there is a swing of 8% to Labor. That's not enough to deliver the seats, but at this stage we're seeing that sort of swing in those seats. But the next seat, which I've been asked to look at, is North Sydney. And at this stage in North Sydney, with 5 of 42 booths, we're seeing Joe Hockey on 51% primary, Mike Bailey on 37% primary, but we're operating on a very small, indicating a 6.2% swing, a very small hospital booth, showing that the Liberals will retain that seat. You'd need more counting, but it would still be an astonishing surprise if the Liberals lost North Sydney.
Okay, now we were talking a moment ago about the seat of Dunkley in Victoria. There's one not far from there, Deakin.
Deakin, which is in Melbourne's east. It's been very tough terrain for us. We've got 7,000 votes counted, 8.3% swing to Labor. It's Phil Barassi's seat, our candidate Mike Simon. That would be a very big movement in Melbourne's east for us.
Phil Barassi holds the seat with a margin of 5%.
And he would have been one of the ones I would have thought the Coalition was hoping to defend. He's quite a high-profile member. It's been quite a difficult and I'd suggest fairly nasty campaign on the ground, so it'll be worth continuing to track that one. We're also doing well in Macquarie, which we've got an 8% swing, including swings to us in Bathurst, which is not the best terrain for us. Obviously, the hills is kinder to us than Bathurst.
Those Deakin figures would surprise you a little bit. I mean, Victoria may well turn out to be a bit patchy.
A bit of a patchwork, yeah. As I say, they're quite inconsistent with Macmillan and Latrobe, where the swings are much less. Phil Barassi is one of the great class of '96, and we'd all expect him to be able to hold that seat, but it's touch and go at the moment.
Yeah.
Just on Macquarie, of course, that is a Labor seat on the redistribution. Kerry Bartlett, has just had his seat cut out from under him. He's a great member, but we accept that that's unlikely to come across to us.
Okay, and we might look now at the seat of Page. We still don't have our graphics, but we've got the figures. So Page, the New South Wales North Coast, where the sitting member Ian Causley is retiring for the National Party, and he held that seat with a margin of 5.5%.
Well, this is the most significant swing we're seeing on the night. There's a swing of 11% going on in 12 of 79 preference counted booths at this stage. Chris Galuptis, the National Party candidate in Maclean, he's on 46.9. His primary vote's done 7. But Janelle Saffin, the ALP candidate, her primary vote is up 10% on the last election. And after preferences, as I said, that turns into an 11% swing. And we've got Page being won by the by the Labor Party, again from the National Party.
Okay, now I'm told we've got some graphics back, and I'm getting conflicting signals here. We might look at North Sydney. We'll take another look at North Sydney, where the sitting member is Joe Hockey, who's had to make a lot of the running on what has been an unpopular issue for the government, that of work choices. What's the story?
This is the figures I just mentioned a moment ago, which is a 6.2% swing in one booth. So I think they're the same figures we were looking at a moment ago.
And we still don't have the graphics, but all right, I'll toss a coin and call up Cowper. Cowper is another of those East Coast, New South Wales seats just up the East Coast from Sydney.
Here we go.
Where the sitting member, it's held by the Nationals, and they hold it with a margin of 6.7%. 11% of the vote counted, Anthony.
Luke Hartsucker's the sitting member up against Paul Secretary. This is where the Labor Party changed their candidate quite late in the campaign. And at this stage, the Nationals are well ahead on the primaries. A big vote there for the Greens. A lot of smaller backwoods booths come in where there's alternative communities at the back of Coffs Harbour. Showing a 2.1% swing to Labor. And at this stage, it's predicting the National Party would retain that seat. Yes. I've actually got a more progressed count at the moment, which is showing 11% counted in the swing 5.9%. So we've actually got newer figures than those, which are making it more in doubt. But Luke Hartsucker is ahead at this stage, but he's certainly not returned definitely.
Okay, well now we might put some computer figures to what Julia Gillard was telling us about Deakin and Melbourne eastern suburbs.
Well, we can't look at these graphics because there's no figures actually there, but I do have numbers in the computer which is showing that there is out of 3 of 37 booths, there's an 8.2% swing to the Labor Party after preferences in 3 booths, and that's indicating that the Labor Party can gain that seat. I must say at the moment that the swing at this is sticking around 4.7, but the majority of the coalition we're predicting is falling down to a 6 now, so that there's quite a swing going on. We're definitely giving the Labor Party Parramatta Page, we're giving them Lindsay, where we're seeing a 7.7% swing. Deakin, I'd be a bit more cautious on Deakin. Corangamite, we're giving them definitely now with a 7.3% swing in 19 of 65 booths. And we're also giving them Braddon. Now, what we've got in doubt is we've got the Labor Party ahead in Wakefield, Robertson, McEwen, Jaga, Eden Monaro and Bennelong. And in Bennelong itself, what we're seeing is that the swing is 4.9% in 3 booths with a preference count.
Let me just throw this at you, Anthony, and I don't expect any graphics to follow it, but what you mentioned Wakefield. Are we starting to see any figures in South Australia that'll make sense?
No, the Wakefield booths are very small, so I don't think it's worthwhile discussing Wakefield. We've only got one of the 50. Manura, it's a far distant booth from memory.
Well, we might take the opportunity to, we're going to get to the seat of Hume again in a moment on your suggestion, Julia, but have you got any more information?
I've got 3.8% to us in Wakefield. That's off 1,000 votes, so they are the small booths coming in first. But I think, that's a very good sign for us because this is a seat that runs from city to country. The small booths are not the strong Labor booths. The strong Labor booths are the Salisbury booths. So if we've got 3.8 off the small country booths, then that's looking very good. I've also got 7.7% in Lindsay, which I think Anthony just confirmed. I would have been very confident about Lindsay even before we hit the Liberal Dirty Tricks campaign late last week.
Nick mentioned you know Wakefield very well, and it was always going to be an incredibly hard slog for you, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, we surprised ourselves by winning Wakefield and Kingston from Labor at the last election.
And I can remember you saying at the time that this guy was a very good campaigner.
Yeah, well, David Fawcett in Wakefield, Kim Richardson in Kingston have been terrific campaigners and members. But obviously fighting huge odds on margins of less than 1%. One of the booths in Wakefield County was actually Elizabeth Grove, so that's very deep in Labor territory. So this is a fascinating seat because it's half country, half city. So I think it's a bit early to call it, but look, I've always accepted the reality that Wakefield and Kingston are going to be pretty tough to hold.
and we fielded good candidates in both. Nick Champion in Wakefield, Amanda Wishworth in Kingston. They fought
both good
hard.
union officials.
Fought very hard indeed. Both very in touch with their communities.
Union officials in the parliament. Okay?
Very in touch with their communities on those figures.
Might give you more fodder for your campaign next time.
Bring them on.
We will now take a look at the seat of Hume. This is New South Wales rural. It's been held by Albie Schultz, a colourful local character since 1998. He holds it with a margin of 12.8%. 15% of the vote counted. Quite significant swing to Labor, but not enough.
Well, at this stage, there's quite a swing on in this seat. We've got 12% counted. Albie Schultz is well ahead. You do tend to get the bigger towns come in later, and that's where a lot of the Labor votes concentrated. So David Grant is well behind on these primary votes. But after the distribution of preferences, there has been a 9.1% swing there. Now, again, this is a big swing in a seat which Labor hasn't won. It doesn't, it's well above the swing. What we're seeing at the moment is exactly a 4.8% swing. Albie Schultz has been re-elected. We're seeing a 4.8% swing, which is exactly the swing you need to change government. But at the moment, it's not quite occurring in the right seats for the Labor Party.
OK, well now, almost certainly the most fascinating seat tonight, the seat of Bennelong. Well, held by John Howard since 1974, 3.7% of the vote counted. He holds this seat with a margin now of 4.1%. Maxine McHugh is the Labor candidate.
Yes, and John Howard's at this stage on the primary votes, he's well behind. Now these are booths. He's behind.
Keep going.
I've got slightly later figures. I've got slightly later figures with Maxine McHugh on 50%, John Howard on 39.9%, but I end up with the same two-party preferred swing, which is 4.9%. And at this stage, we're not giving that seat away. The Labor Party's ahead, but they haven't won the seat on those figures.
OK, I mean, how significant in a seat like that, Anthony, is a count of 3.7%? It obviously depends where it is.
It's 3 booths. It's a significant count, but you can't call it yet. And that's a margin of 50.8, which means you've got to keep waiting until you get more figures.
And we should remind everybody and ourselves at this point the fact that only once in Australian history, 1929, Stanley Bruce, has a sitting Prime Minister lost his seat, and the main issue on which he lost it happened to have been industrial relations. Nick Minchin, you've just gone to the phone, but those figures, John Howard would not be happy with those figures, even though it's 3.7% of the vote.
Well, I think as Anthony said, anything less than 5% of the count really is pretty dodgy. But there's going to be a swing to Labor.
You wouldn't want to be there at this stage just the same, would you?
There's going to be a swing to Labor in that seat. I still expect it to fall just short of the swing required. But Labor have mounted a massive campaign there, and of course the Prime Minister's had to spend a lot of his time campaigning in the rest of the country. But
that must have been. I mean, you're one of the key strategists of the Liberal Party. That must have been a frustration to you all.
Oh, it is difficult. I mean, you get great shots out of the Prime Minister campaigning in Bennelong, and his campaign there has been a good one. But the fact he's have to spend time there is obviously a problem in managing a nationwide campaign.
And tell me, with hopefully a little candour at this stage, with the polls in New South Wales well closed, how formidable a candidate has Maxine McHugh been?
I think we all admit that she's a very good candidate. She also has a very good campaign manager in Bob Hogg, who just happens to reside with her.
Informal.
And I know Bob well, and he's a formidable campaigner. So, John Howard and the rest of us know that he was up against it with Maxine. I still think he'll get there, but we knew we were in for a fight.
Julia Gillard, Labor people were always very cagey whenever asked about how they thought Maxine McHugh would go in Bennelong and how close a fight she'd take it up to John Howard. But have you at any stage felt that she really could win this seat?
I'm a very cautious sort, Kerry. I've thought that she was going to take it right down to the wire, and I think we will see that tonight. It's obviously a tough thing to do to unseat an incumbent Prime Minister, but one thing you can say about Maxine, there's nothing that could have been done in that seat that hasn't been done and been done well. And just on the question of people who used to be at the ABC, of course we have Mike Bailey running in North Sydney. Now that requires a 10% swing, but we're showing a 6% swing there with 5,000 counted, getting an 8.9% swing on the primary. So that's a good result in what is obviously not natural Labor terrain, North Sydney. So, Mike's putting up a fight there.
Kerry, I've just had some figures in from Wentworth, which we haven't looked
Yes,
at.
of course.
Which is another fascinating seat tonight.
Well, a very complex one to try and read, I would think.
Well, on the ABC figures, with 3.8% counted, there's a 0.5% swing to Malcolm Turnbull in that seat, contrary to the swing against us in Bennelong. So
I think there was always going to be there was always a strong chance, wasn't there, that Malcolm Turnbull would be able to, despite his problems, political problems around the pulp mill, that he might well resist even reasonably significant swings.
Well, the situation was distorted by Peter King's campaign last time. I think he got 18% of the vote, and a lot of that leaked to Labor. So you would expect that Malcolm could improve his vote, and that looks like it might happen. Can I just also point out a seat to watch tonight, which I haven't talked about before, is Grey in South Australia, where we lost our very good sitting member, Barry Wakeland, and because of the three cities of Whyalla, Port Augusta and Port Pirie, it's been a worry for us. At the moment, with 4.2% counted, there's a... with 3% counted, there's a 4.2% swing to Labor. Now, it's counted as safe, but we've been quite worried about it, frankly, because of the loss of a very good sitting member in a big seat. But I think it's one just to keep an eye on tonight.
OK, we'll watch it. Now, the seat of Lindsay, this is a seat that we've all found very interesting going into this election. This is Sydney's outer western suburbs, held by the popular Jackie Kelly now since, God, how many elections, Anthony? Since 96. She's one of those who helped capture the Howard Battlers. And she went into this election, she's retiring at this election, but she basically handed as a baton a margin of 2.9% to Karen Kajov. Now, what's the story?
Well, David Bradbury's run twice against Jackie Kelly, been unable to win, but up against Karen Kajov, he's well ahead at this stage. And David Bradbury, his primary vote is up 12% in 7 booths, and on the 2 candidate preferred, which is only on 3 booths, we're seeing a 9% swing. So that matches the 2-party preferred. And in his third attempt, it looks like David Bradbury will win that seat.
OK, now, we're going to look at the Labor seat of Isaacs in Melbourne's outer southeastern suburbs. It's held with a margin of only 1.5%, 11% of the vote counted. This is being contested by Mark Dreyfus for the ALP, and they are promoting him as one of their talented newcomers. And 11% of the vote counted.
And we've got 11% counted, and Mark Dreyfus is ahead on the primaries, but this is a seat that's got some very patchy results from different parts of the electorate. And while Mark Dreyfus is well ahead on these primary votes, and his primary vote is up 4%, we've got 6 of 35 preference counted booths, and it's showing the Labor Party behind on those. I think I've just got later figures with a slightly more preference count at this stage. There's not one's not being given away. The Liberals are slightly ahead. We're now predicting that Labor will gain that seat with a swing to them. So the figures are firming up as they come in. We get constant updates, and sometimes the updates are ahead of the graphics.
OK, the seat of McEwen now. This is central Victoria. It's been held by Fran Bailey since 1996. For the Liberal Party, she's Minister for Small Business and Tourism. She holds it with a margin of 6.4%. We've now had nearly 22% of the vote counted. And
Fran Bailey's ahead at this stage. There's a swing of around 5% going on. A big vote there for the Greens, as you'll notice. 10% for the Greens, 48 for Fran Bailey, 37 for Rob Mitchell. We know we've got 25 of 75 preference counts in this electorate, and it's showing a 5.5% swing, which means the seat's in doubt at this stage. There's a lot of big booths closer to Melbourne still to come in.
OK, now one of the seats that would seem to have gone to Labor, this is the seat of Braddon. In northwest Tasmania, held by Mark Baker. He may turn out only to have it for one term. He went into this with a margin of 1.1%, but there's a significant swing against him.
And Sid Sidebottom is the former member for the seat. He was defeated by Baker at the last election. He's behind on the primary votes. There's a big vote there for the Greens, 8.5%. In traditionally their weakest electorate in Tasmania, but we know they've got 33 of the 74 booths counted, and it's showing a swing of 3.5%, and we're giving that seat. I've now got a swing of 4%, so this swing is firming up for Labor in this seat, and so Labor has won Braddon.
And we cross now to Mark Baker in Braddon. Now, Mark Baker, you won this seat from Sid Sidebottom last time. It looks like he's taken it back from you. You prepared to concede that?
Oh, look, not yet. It's just too early. Another hour or so, and we will certainly get a more clearer definition of where we're heading.
We're showing a 3.5 swing against you. You're sitting on 1.1. It now looks pretty... Well, you're certainly in serious trouble. You'd have to admit that, wouldn't you? Do you know why?
Oh, look, if those votes, those numbers are correct, you're exactly right. But we will see in another half an hour or so, and see what the votes are saying then.
Let's talk about some of the issues down there. This is where the federal intervention to save the Mercy Hospital was meant to give you votes. Has it proved to be a bit of a mess in the end, and a problem for you?
Look, not at all. The Mercy Hospital was exactly what was right for the community. An area of 70,000 people, to get the hospital back was just a fantastic result for the community, and we will certainly we support that action. That was the right thing to do to the community, and we will continue to work, if it's in the Senate, if it's hopefully we can retain this seat, and we'll continue to develop and grow that region's health services.
Well, Mark, what do you think the problem is for you now if you're about to be voted out of that seat? What do you think? I mean, is it simply the fact that the Mark Latham scare tactic on the forestry is no longer there?
Oh, look, it's like I said before, it's too early to tell yet, and we'll revisit that in an hour or so.
No, but what I'm asking you is why you think this swing is going against you.
Look, it's very difficult to tell. The support out in the community has been fantastic, so we will just wait and see in another hour or so.
All right, Mark Baker, not giving too much away at the moment. We'll leave you there. Thank you.
No. Thank you.
We'll continue the seat run now. We're going to take another look at this back to the seat of Wakefield in South Australia. They've only been counting there for...
I'm not
Sorry,
sure.
I'm getting conflicting pictures here. We'll try Deakin first. Deakin, we've already talked about once. This is in Melbourne's eastern suburbs. This is held for the Liberal Party by Philip Baresi since '96 with a margin of 5%. We've now had nearly 28% of the vote counted, and there is a strong swing to the ALP.
And this is Mike Simons, the Labor candidate, one of those, an ETU official, and he's ahead on the primary votes at this stage with 13% counted. I've got an even later count, and he's still ahead. And at this stage, we're seeing 43.9 and 43 for the Liberals.
What is the problem?
We've got a preference count in 9 of the 37 booths. At this stage, I'm seeing a swing of 7.2, 8.2 there. It's firming up as more numbers come in, and the Labor Party looks well set to win Deakin.
Now we'll have a look at Wakefield. This is northern Adelaide, nearby rural area, South Australia. The booths closed there nearly an hour ago. We've had we've got 7% of the vote counted. This is a Liberal seat held with 0.7% margin by David Fawcett just since 2004. 7% counted. A significant swing to the ALP, it seems, Anthony.
Yes, and Nick Champion is ahead on the primary votes. I'm starting to get primary votes in from around Elizabeth, which is the Labor Party's strength. And so that's where the Labor Party's strength is in Elizabeth. The Liberal Party's polling poorest. But we're factoring in the boot. The swing isn't quite as dramatic after preferences. That's 3.8% swing there. I've got a later swing, which is now 8%. We're prepared to call Nick Champion as elected in that seat. At this stage, the computer isn't. But we think Labor has won Wakefield.
Okay, the seat of Wentworth, another one of those that we're going to be watching for quite possibly through the night. Held by Malcolm Turnbull, the Environment Minister. He's now facing only his second election. He was defending a margin of 2.5% against George Newhouse of the Labor Party. We've now had not quite 8% of the vote counted. Anthony?
And Malcolm Turnbull's ahead on the primary votes, 1,475 to George Newhouse, 1,186. George Newhouse's girlfriend, former girlfriend Daniela Cuya, notice that doesn't finish in the top 5, so she hasn't polled that well. The Greens have got 15%. We've got a swing of 3.4% to the Liberal Party there. I've got slightly later figures showing a 2.3% swing to Labor, which would make the actual seat very marginal. So while that graphic is re-electing Malcolm Turnbull, I think the figures are actually not home yet.
Not yet.
I've got some results in Sturt. I've got 3 booths.
Sturt in South Australia.
Sturt in South Australia. Christopher Pyne, our candidate, Mia Hanshin. Got 3 booths. That's Gillies Plains, Glenunga and Marsden. 2,000 votes, and we're showing a 6.9% swing to Labor. We need 6.8 there, so that's one worth keeping an eye on.
And I've got some in Boothby, 3.4% of the vote counted there, which is starting to get interesting. 4.5% to Labor, which is not enough. And as I said at the outset, I think we will retain Boothby and Sturt.
But how are you feeling about Sturt on those?
Well, they're the real Labor parts of that seat.
Yeah.
And as I say, I think Labor will get swings in its areas, but I think in the more Liberal parts of that seat, there won't be much of a swing. So
Can I just say on Boothby, yeah, I've got 4.5 too, and that's not enough. But one of those booths is North Brighton, which I wouldn't have thought was normally our terrain, because it's nice and upper income. So that's worth keeping an eye on. And there's been a lot of carry-on about Nicole Corns' campaign, but I think she's run a good campaign. She's a good candidate, and it's worth watching.
Against that, Julia, every South Australian I've spoken to in the last 6 weeks has all said they don't believe she can win that seat.
Look, I grew up in...
But the comments, sadly for her, were not so much about how hard the seat was to win, but about how she was going.
Look, I grew up in Boothby. I know that seat well. It's been a long-term Liberal seat. Yes, its boundaries have shifted a bit. It was always going to be a very tough ask for Labor. She's had some media problems with the Adelaide media, but I campaigned with her on the ground. She's got a lovely touch with people, very well recognised, really good on-the-ground campaigner. So I think some of the bad press she's got, she hasn't deserved, and I'd quite happily go and campaign with her.
OK, well, again, we'll know soon enough how that's going to play out. But we might take another look at the seat of Eden Monaro. There's now 23% of the vote counted. This, of course, is the bellwether seat, the one that's gone with government in the last 14 elections. Gary Nairn, the popular sitting Liberal member, holding it with a margin of 3.3%. Anthony?
Yes, I'll also say the Prime Minister is still on track to lose his seat at this stage in Bennelong, but I'll do Eden Monaro first, and then we have a cross. In Eden Monaro, we're seeing a swing of, we're seeing Gary Nairn ahead, 43.4 to Mike Kelly, 43. What we haven't seen yet is any Queanbeyan booths coming in. So when we're factoring in what booth the information is from, we're getting a swing of 4.3, 4.4, which has got Labor Party ahead. It's leaning towards again, but we're not giving the seat away yet at this stage.
And Mike Kelly joins us now in Eden Monaro. We're not giving it to you yet, Mike Kelly, but it's a likely gain to you. What are you feeling is happening there?
G'day, Tony. We all feel very positive. We've had a great feedback from the community today, but of course we'll have to wait and see how the numbers go. This is a tough seat.
No Queanbeyan booths in, apparently, according to Anthony Green. How significant is that, and how much might that change the equation?
Well, I think it's very significant. Queanbeyan is a great town and it's a great place for us, but we're hoping to do well all over Eden Monaro.
The exit poll, rather informal exit poll, much earlier in the day, was showing an easy win for you in this seat. It's looking like it's much tighter than that was predicted.
Well, I think it's always tough to rely on those sorts of polls. It's only the numbers that count, and those are the only ones I'm looking at.
Have you seen any signs of the latest polls that we had, the News poll, the Galaxy poll, showed very tight results around the country, but narrow Labor victories? You seem to be headed in that direction, don't you?
Well, we can only hope. I mean, we understood from the start that this was one of those seats we had to win to get the 16 we need to get the Rudd Labor team in the saddle for the future of this country. So I've been dedicated to that task, and we're just hoping tonight that we will be there and we will deliver a Rudd Labor victory.
There is no question you've been up against a very formidable campaigner in Gary Nairn, and one with a lot of money to spread around the electorate. It must have been very difficult, in fact, to campaign against that kind of largesse from an incumbent.
We knew it was going to be a tough challenge. Gary is a tough campaigner, and he's built up a good base here over 11 and a half years. So, you know, that was the challenge. But we've had an inspirational effort from an army of volunteers and supporters, and the motivation is there to win this seat. And really, for me, this is coming home to my own family and community, so I've got special motivation to try and bring this one home.
And Mike Kelly, what are the main issues you're identifying out there among the voters?
Oh, without doubt, work choices was a big factor across the region. We have many workers and many enterprises who are on collective agreements that are doing well on those agreements, and so are their enterprises. And they were afraid that they'd be the next ones in the crosshairs of these extreme industrial laws. So it was a big issue where there were a number of people also who were directly affected adversely by these laws who, were in tears to me telling me their stories. So it was a big factor. Climate change was also highly significant, and our water issues, of course, and health too. The crisis in rural health is really a very big issue here.
Finally, now you are obviously reasonably confident at the moment, but there must be in the back of your mind the slight doubt that this could be snatched away from you. There's so many votes uncounted. I mean, more than 23% at the moment counted, so you are ahead, but only slightly. How is your level of confidence right now?
You can never be confident in even Monaro. It's always going to be a knife-edge seat. That's the nature of the existence, even if you do win the seat. So we'll just get our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
OK then, Mike Kelly, we'll leave you there. We thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Tony. Cheers.
OK, I'm now joined also by Senator Mitch Fifield, from another Victorian, and you must be nervous by what you're seeing in Victoria.
Apprehensive, but not entirely nervous. We're still doing quite well in a few seats. Macmillan, we could well hold. There's a 1% swing towards us at the moment.
How many are you conceding, incidentally?
None at the moment. I think there's something that's very important to bear in mind. At this election, pre-poll and postal votes are up something of the order of 40% on the previous election. In some electorates, there will be pre-poll and postal votes of 12,000. So if you've got a close result, that could make a huge difference, particularly given last election, we were getting something of the order of 60% of postal and pre-poll votes. So, yes, it looks like we're in a bit of trouble in Deakin and Corangamite, but on the current figures, given the high pre-poll and postal votes, I certainly wouldn't give those away yet.
Let's go back to Stephen Smith, just on those points, on what's happening in Victoria. Are you thinking you've got 2 seats? Pretty much sewn up in Victoria, but no other Liberal seats?
Well, in the 60 that we currently hold, there was one that we just had to look at, that was Corio, where Gavin O'Connor was running as an independent, but we're OK in Corio. Then in terms of what we pick up, we think we're really in the hunt in Corangamite and Deakin. The others, I think, as Mitch says, are tougher for us, but I think at this stage we can say out of Victoria, I think we've picked up 2. There was a danger that we had a big swing to us in Victoria of 4 or 5%, but not pick anything up. At this stage, I think we've got Deakin and Corangamite.
All right, keep watching. We'll come back to both of you.
OK, this is a very interesting part of the evening now, because our computers are giving away at this stage, with Queensland not yet kicking in with any significant votes, 10 seats from government to Labor, and 4 of those seats are in New South Wales. One of them is the Prime Minister's seat of Bennelong. We are at this stage saying that Bennelong will be lost tonight. Now, if we step back from that and take a look at the national swing, we've got 14 points, when we call it the national swing. This is New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, with votes now starting to kick in South Australia, and very shortly they will start to move through the system from Queensland. So 14.6% of the vote counted, 52.3% has gone to Labor. This is a two-party preferred, 47.7% to the coalition. Which represents about a 5% swing. Now, of course, the way this pans out we're still going to have to wait to see. But nonetheless, the focus now shifts very quickly onto Queensland. What we might do is take a look at what we call our scoreboard graphic, because this will show where the seats are shifting. And if we look, first of all, we're just going through again that nationwide swing. 52. Now we come to the scoreboard. OK, the Liberals with a primary vote of 36.6%. We've given them 47 seats, a net loss to them of 7. The Nationals, a swing of a primary vote of 5.3%. We say they've won 9 seats, but have lost 2 seats. Labor, is showing a primary count at this stage of 42.9%, so say 43. We're giving them 56 seats, which is again at this stage of 9 on that graphic. Anthony, we might now look at the chamber graphic, which is theoretically in the Parliament, and see how we are distributing those seats.
Well, what we're seeing at this stage, we've got... we're seeing a swing which is big enough to put Labor in government, but we're not seeing a swing which is in all the right seats. They're the seats we're definitely giving away to both sides, 56, 56 and 1. We've got a few more seats which are leaning one way or the other, and we're getting 62 for the Coalition, 64 for Labor, with 2 others. Now, what we're not seeing at this stage is Queensland. We're not seeing Queensland figures yet, and we certainly don't see... I'm not sure why everyone's getting excited about that, but we've got Queensland to come. Queensland and Western Australia are going to decide this election at this stage. We're seeing enough seats change. Well, we're seeing enough seats change, but we're not necessarily seeing them changing in the right area.
Okay, now can we now focus on the seat of Bennelong for a moment? This is the Prime Minister's seat. He's held it for 33 years, with 11.8% of the vote counted. John Howard is showing a swing against him of 6.6%. And we're saying that that is an ALP gain for Maxine McHugh.
Okay, we've got for Labor Party, we've got on the figures there, we've got the Labor Party on 46% primary vote. We've got John Howard on 43.7% primary vote. Now, when we factor in the booths and the preferences that detail is from, we've got a preference count in 9 of the 47 booths, and we are saying that there is a swing of 6.6% to Labor on those 9 booths with preferences, and John Howard would be set to lose his seat on those figures.
Nick Minchin, I must come to you now. What do you think?
Well, the count is still, I don't think, sufficient to start calling that seat. I do notice, however, there's been a very big shift of some 10% from the Greens straight to Labor, because that's the risk for us, you know, that you get a big increase in the Labor primary vote. Clearly, most of it at the expense of the Greens. So John Howard's holding his primary reasonably well, but seeing this big shift. But I think still too early to call, but it's going to get under the wire.
It's, look, I mean you knew that this was a possibility, but until you start to see these figures, it doesn't actually, it's because it's such an incredible concept to actually wrap your head around. Well, particularly this Prime Minister, who has earned the reputation of being the toughest and the canniest political leader that we've seen for a very long time.
Well, remembering that we all knew the seat has changed dramatically underneath him in terms of redistributions, and the last redistribution made it even more marginal, only 4% on the back of a statewide very good position for the Liberal Party, with some of the issues moving against us. So we, I guess, internally all knew that this was going to go down to the wire, but we, you know, at this stage, I hope he will still get over the line.
Julia?
I think Bennelong will go down to the wire, but it's an interesting one to watch, certainly the contest of the night in that sense. I've just got some figures in from New South Wales. Paterson, 42 booths counted, so that's more than 25,000 votes, showing a 6.3% swing to us. We need 6.3%, so that's one worth watching. That's Bob Baldwin versus our Jim Arneman. Robertson with 20,000 votes counted, showing 6.8 to us. We need 6.9, but the booths closer to Sydney are yet to come in, so they're the, you know, more urban booths. So I think that's also showing some very good results for us.
Yeah, these Paterson, Robertson and Dobell, those Central Coast seats are all really line ball. You know, there's clearly a swing on, but we've got a reasonable margin. I think that we may not be able to call them tonight.
Okay, now we've got Fran Kelly standing by on the tally room floor with Stephen Conroy, who I think is going to stick his neck out.
Well, I'm going to...
Stephen Conroy, there's definitely a swing on. It looks like the sort of swing that Labor was talking about it needed to win. Can you call this yet? Can you call this for Labor?
Oh, it's too early to call, with no Queensland results in, no Western Australian results in, and still early in South Australia's counts.
But you have been taking calls from booths in Victoria, and Victoria last night, I know Labor types were suggesting that perhaps it had stalled for you. It's holding up?
Well, it's probably going a little bit better than we'd hoped at this stage. We're seeing very, very positive signs in Corangamite, very positive signs in Deakin. Disappointed at the figures on the computer at the moment in Latrobe, but I've spoken with people in the booths in Latrobe, big booths. They're not up on the computer yet, and good swings to us there. So hoping to see that flow through into the computer soon. Same in McEwen. McEwen at 6.4, bit of a smoky, but seeing some very positive signs in big booths in McEwen for us as well, but not up on the computer yet.
OK, I think you're prepared to count 9 seats for Labor so far. Does that include Bennelong?
I really try and avoid counting Bennelong because you can't write the Prime Minister off. But look, Maxine McHugh has run a fantastic campaign, and I know that every Labor voter in the country's heart is with her, but it's too early to call that one. It's only 11% counted.
As I said before, I noticed you've had the mobile phone glued to your ear. Obviously, people are ringing you from all over. What is the mood from those calls you're getting from across the different states?
Well, so far, northern New South Wales is going gangbusters. It's very positive for us there. In Victoria, better than expected. Tasmania at the moment, Braddon, Sid's got back, so some justice for Sid. And we're clawing back into the race in Bass. South Australia, a little too early, and we're hoping that Queensland begins to match the rest of the country.
Thanks very much, Stephen.
Thanks, Fran.
Kerry, we hoped you'd make the call, but no good. No, close, but no cigar quite yet.
Well, Anthony's about to stick his neck out, and he may do so slightly cautiously, but Anthony, on the basis of the figures in the rest of it, in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, we still don't have any meaningful figures from Queensland, but
if Labor picks up 2 or 3 seats in Queensland, you're talking about a very narrow Labor victory. If Labor starts to pick up more seats than that, then they start to build up a bit of a majority. But they're probably gaining, and the problem is there's some very slow counts in some seats, extremely slow. Some, like Kingston, only 1 or 2 booths reporting, very slow. So we're seeing enough swings in seats to suggest that the Labor Party is probably going to win this election. But we just need 1 or 2 seats which are lagging behind, and we need Queensland to be sure of that. But there's certainly, the swing is 5.1%. It's at that point where Labor's just getting into office with enough seats.
Julia Gillard, what was the firm intelligence of the size of the swing in Queensland? The last intelligence you received, what size swing were you reasonably expecting there?
Well, last intelligence I received, we were expecting the biggest swing in the country to be in New South Wales and Queensland to be the second biggest swing. So if we need 2 or 3 seats, according to Anthony there, I think we're good for well more than that, well more than 2 or 3.
So you are expecting to win, what, 4, 5, 6, up to?
Yeah, we were very optimistic of, 5, 6, something like that in Queensland. We are expecting considerable swings there. We knew New South Wales was coming in very strongly for us, and Queensland was just slightly behind it, but coming in very, very solidly for Labor. Just
so we understand the significance of what we're looking at now, what Anthony is saying, working through the figures and the computer projections, without Queensland, Labor is only about 2 or 3 seats short of being able to claim government, and on the reasonable expectation of what may happen in Queensland, Julia Gillard is saying that they would expect to pick up 5 or 6 seats. So the interesting thing to me is that it's now nearly 50 minutes since the count began in Queensland, and we still don't have meaningful figures.
Well, the same is occurring in some South Australian electorates. We've got a very slow count in a number of electorates, and one of them is Sturt. Now, some of these seats are so close, I suspect there's a lot of scrutineering going on, which will be slowing down the count. The electorate of Sturt, and here we go.
This is Adelaide's inner eastern suburbs. Christopher Pyne is a junior minister.
Again, an hour after counting, they would have expected a slightly more progressed count than that. Christopher Pyne against Mia Henshin. Pyne is ahead, but we got a preference count in several booths, which is indicating that when you distribute the preferences and take account from the disparate booths in this electorate, that we're seeing a swing of 8.2% to the Labor Party. 8.2, yes, the count has gone up there on this figure. We've actually got an updated figure there, and it's indicating 8.2%. It's in doubt, but at this stage, the Labor Party's ahead in that seat.
Just very quickly, Nick Minchin, because I know you've got an intense interest in this seat, and you've been confident you're going to hold it. Does that figure shake you at all?
No, I actually live in Sturt. I've seen Christopher Pyne's campaign has been superb. Look, the Labor Party did well in choosing Mia Henshin. She's one of their bright young candidates. She was a lot better candidate, frankly, than, with great respect to Julia, Nicole Corns. But I'm confident Chris will just hang on. In Boothby, in fact, with 5.9% of the vote counted, the swing to Labor is only 1.3. So as I say, I admired Julia's loyalty, but I think Labor made a very big mistake in picking Nicole Kunz, who's, you know, a lovely woman, but I think the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Can we come back to the graphics now and have a look at the seat of Macon? This is another one of those very marginal South Australian seats. This is in Adelaide's northeastern suburbs. It was held by Trish Draper with a margin of only 0.9%, and she is retiring at this election.
And
so,
the new candidate is businessman Bob Day up against Tony Zappia, who ran last time. He's the mayor of Salisbury and runs a big gym in the area. He's well ahead on the primary votes. His primary vote's up 7. The Liberal primary vote is down 5, and that's translating at this stage into a 5% swing to Labor, and the Labor Party should go on to gain Macon. I find it hard to see how the Liberal Party would necessarily recover from those primary figures.
And Bob Day actually joins us now in Macon. Bob, not a very promising prospect for you, having replaced Trish Draper, who's retiring. It's very hard, obviously, replacing a retiring member who's been around for some time, but it looks like you may well have lost.
Well, I haven't heard any results yet. I visited all the polling booths today, and my troops were pretty upbeat. They got a very, very good reception at all 34 booths in Macon. So we'll just have to see what the results show. But if the reports back from the volunteers on the booths is anything to go by, then we're definitely in with a chance.
Right now, 5% swing against you. I think you're holding it by less than 1%. So let me ask you this: if you lose this seat, what would you put it down to?
Well, what do I put down there? That I haven't been able to effectively. Well, it's up to the voters. I'm very satisfied that I've communicated the message, that they know who I am, what I stand for, and what I won't stand for. They also know the government's message, the government's track record. I think we've effectively communicated our message, and it's up to the voters to decide, and we have to be happy with that.
Bob, you were up against a pretty tough candidate in Tony Zappia as well, local businessman, man who's already run again, perhaps more experienced than you in running races like this.
Yes, he has, but well, I was pretty happy with the campaign that we ran for the whole year. I was happy with the messages, understanding the issues, and again, it's up to the voters. So we'll just see. It's in their hands. My opponent, he ran a good campaign, communicating his message and the opposition's message. I feel we did the same. So we'll just have to wait and see. I've not heard any results yet.
Have you been disappointed about the way the national campaign was handled? Not to mention the fact there was an interest rate rise right in the middle of it, which must affect a seat like yours pretty heavily.
I don't worry about things that I have no control over. The government ran its national messages about the economy and security and those sorts of things, and I ran the local campaign on the local issues.
Okay, Bob Day, well, thank you very much. We'll leave you there.
And we are actually starting to get belatedly some numbers in from Queensland. Not yet completely meaningful, but what are you getting, Anthony?
Oh, we're getting some big swings in Dawson. Big shift in the Labor primary vote, but I'm not...
And Dawson has been a safe National Party seat for Dion Kelly since 1996.
Yeah, though I'm not convinced that the swing that's showing up as being huge for Labor will necessarily follow through. But we are seeing a 9.6% swing in Blair, which would indicate Labor would go on to win Blair. So that's the first Queensland seat. And now that we're seeing some Queensland figures start to come in, the percentage vote, the swing is starting to just drift upwards, because the swing is over 6% at the moment in Queensland, and we're starting to see a few more seats fall. I've got Labor up to 78 seats at the moment as a prediction, which gets them into government. But we are seeing some quite close contests. So at the moment we're predicting Labor on 78 seats and a majority of 6, but we've got a few more Queensland figures to come in yet.
So what you're saying is that is a cautious prediction of Labor forming a government?
It's a cautious prediction, yes.
Okay. What we can expect and hope is that those Queensland figures now are going to start coming in much more strongly. And Julia and Nick, is either of you picking up any hint of Queensland at all?
Well, in Bowman they've got 2.9% counted and a swing against us of only 1.4%. Capricornia 1.6% to Labor. Flynn only 2.2% to Labor. So at this stage the swings don't look big enough to give Labor what they want. but I think we'll see a big variation across the state.
I've got a very small number in Moreton, about 700 to 800 votes, showing a swing of 3.8%. We need 2.8% for Moreton. That's Graham Perrott. I've got an absurdly large swing in Dawson, 20.3, with 3,000 votes counted.
Treat that one with great caution.
I think we will treat that with great caution, but Dawson is worth watching with the demographic shifts there and a good campaign.
The 20% swing is based on the Hamilton Island booth, which is never very reliable.
You think they were feeling good?
It's mainly conducted for postal and for absent votes and pre-polls, and from one election to another, you can never guarantee the same people are actually living on the island.
Right.
So.
You'd always feel good if you were on Hamilton
to be able to say you'd spent any time there, the seat of McMillan, we're going to slip back to Victoria. This is Eastern Victoria, held by Russell Broadbent, came in for his second term in 2004. Held it with a swing, with a margin of 5%, and suggesting a swing to the Liberals here.
Yes, so there's not much change has happened at all in this electorate. This is Russell Broadbent looks set at this stage to go on to be re-elected for the first time. He's been in Parliament several times. He's run unsuccessfully many times, but never managed to be re-elected at this stage. And the primary votes, this is a rather diverse electorate. The primary votes will not stay that way, but the two-party preferred looks like it will end up looking like that, 57 out of 82 booths. And Russell Broadbent is elected with a very small swing to him in that election.
And we'll go to Russell Broadbent now. And McMillan, Russell Broadbent, extraordinarily, given the events, you've actually increased your majority. How did you do it?
Well, the people down here backed me and I backed my people, and that's how we have approached the last 3 years. Team Broadbent has been solid throughout the 3 years, and the election campaign was just a reflection of that.
It's a bit of a case of if at first you don't succeed, try again, because this is a retention of the seat. You haven't been able to do that before.
What about again and again and again and again? And we were never going to give up here. We knock doors down till they fall down.
Are you a little concerned, however, about what you're seeing nationally? You may actually come in, back in, but be in opposition if the trend continues as it is.
When you've lost as many times as I have, of course I feel for my colleagues and friends right now. I know that the depth of their pain, and I know what they'll go through in the time to come. If what I'm hearing is correct, of course, of all people, I'm the one that would know exactly how they feel.
Several of them are in Victoria by the look of it. Both Deakin and Corangamite look set currently to fall to the ALP on the figures that we're seeing. Your colleagues, you must be concerned about them, obviously. Have you been speaking to them? Do you know what's been going on in their seats that didn't go on in yours?
No, we've been concentrating very hard on McMillan every day for 3 years here, and particularly the last 6 weeks. It's been a very, very tough battle in McMillan, very hard-fought campaign. The Labor Party ran a very strong campaign out here, and what we did was the very best we could with what we had at our disposal.
Let me ask you this, Russell Broadbent, while I've got you there, how would you feel about coming back into Parliament and finding the Prime Minister not there because he'd lost his seat, which may well happen?
Well, he is the battler of all battlers, and he didn't shy away for 1 minute from standing in a marginal seat himself. Exactly what he's asked us all to do, he did himself. I dare say there were plenty of chances for the Prime Minister to move to another seat and take a safer seat earlier on. He chose not to do that. He chose to fight the fight like the rest of it. He is the ultimate battler, and I only have great praise for him.
Well, virtually unique among Prime Ministers to have been sat in a marginal seat at such a critical election.
Well, it may be, yes, it is unique among Prime Ministers, but he didn't walk away from the fight. The easiest thing for the Prime Minister to do would have been to walk away from the fight, and the toughness that I know is in this man, and as you know, I have dealt with him on a number of occasions in difficult times. He is tough, he is bright, he is brilliant, and I've only got plaudits for him.
OK, Russell Broadbent, we'll leave you there. Thanks very much, and congratulations on retaining your seat.
Thank you.
Russell Broadbent, this time able to put his seat together 2 terms in a row. We're now going to focus on Queensland, where the count is coming in. We've got a few seats we want to look at. We'll start with the seat of Dawson. This is a central Queensland seat based around Mackay and Bowen on the coast, held by Dion Kelly since 1996. for the Nationals with a margin of 10%. And yet we're talking about it as a seat that's in play tonight.
And what we're seeing at the moment on the primary votes there is Deanne Kelly is ahead, but remarkably her primary vote is down 3% compared to last time, and the Labor primary vote is up 13.5%. And that's on 11 primary booths that I'm looking at. And then when we actually factor in the preference figures, what we're seeing is a 16% swing. Now, I'm a little more doubtful about that because that includes, as again, Hamilton Island and one of the hospitals in Mackay, so they're not always reliable. But there is a big swing on endorsement at this stage, though I wouldn't go as far as calling James Bidgood as elected.
And this was a seat that we began to pay attention to when we saw Kevin Rudd suddenly slip up and campaign there. Now, Petrie in Brisbane's northern suburbs, another of the Queensland seats in play, held by the Liberal by Teresa Gambaro since '96, with a margin of 7.5%. Only 1% of the vote counted, but what's it telling us, Anthony?
And it's showing that Yvette Darth is the Labor candidate, and she's ahead at the moment. These are two joint booths at Bald Hills and Mango Hill, and she's ahead, but we're estimating if you take account of those booths and you make an estimate of preferences, then what we're actually seeing is a swing of 5.6% to the Labor, which leaves it in doubt at this stage. It's not enough to deliver the seat, but it is only two booths with an estimate of preferences. So Teresa Gambaro is still in battle with Yvette Darth.
OK, the seat of Moreton in Brisbane's inner southern suburbs. Again, only 1% counted. This is held by Gary Hardgrave. He's also held this seat since '96. Margin of 2.8%. Anthony?
And this is from the Liberal end of the electorate, Tennyson and Graceville West, where Graham Perrott ran last time and was defeated. This is his second contest in the electorate. At this stage, we're seeing that the Gary Hardgrave is on 51.6 and Graham Perrott on 37.8. And after the distribution of preferences, we're looking at a swing of 3.8, which puts the Labor Party just ahead in that electorate. And we've got Blair or not?
Yes, we're going to have Blair. Blair is another one of those seats in play, held by the Liberals around Ipswich and the Brisbane Valley, with a margin of 5.7%. By Cameron Thompson for the Liberal Party. We've got 4.1% of the vote counted here, Anthony.
And these figures are looking very good for the Labor Party. Shane Newman ran last time unsuccessfully. He's up against Cameron Thompson, who defeated Pauline Hanson in 1998. At this stage, Shane Newman is ahead on the primary votes. We've got 8.8% counted. We've got a count in 10 of the 64 booths after preferences. And they're indicating that there's a swing to Labor of 7.7%, which is enough to put the Labor Party ahead. We aren't giving it away, definitely, but at this stage, that's another seat that Labor is ahead in.
Now, Julia Gillard, you've got some figures from Bowman. This is this is on the coast from Brisbane, a relatively prosperous seat held by the Liberals with a margin of 8.9%. This is Andrew Lamming's seat.
That's right. I've got 6 booths, around 5,000 votes, showing a swing of 7.7. So that's...
And you need 8.9.
Need 8.9, so that's not enough, but we'll have to keep an eye on Bowman.
Yeah. Nick, you heard those figures I mentioned just a little while ago on Bennelong, where a quarter of the booths have had the preference count, 18.6% of the overall vote counted, and a 5.4% swing away from the Prime Minister. That's not looking good, is it?
It's not looking good, but I would point out, as Mitch Fifield did, that postal votes are going to play an interesting role in this election. There were, on my count, 5,000 postal votes in Bennelong, and based on the AEC's estimates of where they're coming from, 2-1 in our favour, which on the face of it would give us a 1% gain from postal votes. So the Labor Party is going to need, at least in my view, a swing of more than 5% to believe it can win this. Anything less than 5.1, I don't think you can count this because of postal votes.
OK, now we're just talking about Bennelong. Are we ready for our seat run? Let's have a crack. There's now 26.7% of the vote counted in Bennelong, and that swing seems to be coming back. John Howard holding with a margin of 4.1%. Maxine McHugh pressing him closely. Anthony?
And this is a seat that continues to be in doubt. We're shifting this back into the in doubt category. Maxine McHugh on 1128, 45.3. I'll keep talking, presuming that we see the graphics there. Maxine McHugh on 45.3 to John Howard 45.9. At this stage, we are saying 50.2, and it is in doubt. So we're not calling that electorate at this stage. It is a close contest in Wentworth.
And on the basis of what Nick Minchin was saying about those postals, he's saying Labor would need to be on around 5%. to be feeling at all confident of that seat. Now we'd like to take a look at the seat of Wentworth. This is Sydney's eastern suburbs. This has always been a Liberal seat. Malcolm Turnbull's held it since 2004 on a margin on paper of 2.5%, but he might be starting to feel a little bit happy.
Yeah, well, Malcolm Turnbull, no difficulty. I think he's going to be returned. He's well ahead on the primary votes against George Newhouse. The Greens running third, and effectively his primary vote is close to 50. He's got a 9% swing to him on the primary votes, and after the distribution of preferences, we're seeing virtually no swing. We're not giving it quite away yet, but we expect that Malcolm Turnbull will win that seat.
Okay, now the seat of Bonner in Brisbane's inner eastern suburbs. This is another one that was one of the very marginal Liberal seats that was expected to be in trouble. Ross Vasta has only held this seat since 2004. Very slender margin of 0.5%. We've got 6.2% of the vote counted, and
at this stage, his primary vote is up. The Labor Party primary vote is up 8.1. The Ross Vasta's primary vote is down 3.6. Now, those are Labor voting booths, so you can't rely on the primaries, but we do have a pretty accurate two-party preferred. It's showing in doubt. I've got some slightly later figures which puts the swing up to 7.4%, and call this seat a gain for the Labor Party. So our latest figures arrived after the graphic was put up, unfortunately, but we are now classing Bonner as a Labor gain. Okay, let's look at the seat of Herbert. This goes to Townsville, held by Peter Lindsay, a formidable local member since 1996. He's defending it with a margin of 6.2%. There's a very small percentage of the vote counted, just 0.2%. Anthony, can we draw any conclusions at all from that? Oh, these are very small count, but we'll give you a quick look at what this figure is. This is from Picnic Bay. I can't remember if that's on Magnetic Island or not, but it's a small booth. And at this stage, it is on, someone just told me here, it is on Magnetic Island. And if you factor in that swing in that booth, it's 3.8%. But clearly this early in the night, it's in doubt, and we can't call that electorate.
Okay, now we're going to look at Bass, and we're now saying that Bass is a likely ALP gain. This is in Tasmania. It's northeast, based around Launceston, held by Michael Ferguson on a margin of 2.6%. We've now got nearly 80% of the vote counted, and that swing could be big enough to see it move to Labor. Anthony?
Yes, and what we're seeing there is a likely Labor Party gain. It's Labor Party ahead. Michael Ferguson on 22,823, but there's a big vote there for the Greens, and also we know with the booth the information this is coming from. That's the 79. We got 47 of the 50 primary booths, 34 of the 50 with two candidate preferred, and it's showing a 3.2% swing. And at this stage, it's got Labor ahead, though not necessarily holding the seat. What I would say, Kerry, is that what we're still seeing at the moment is Labor tracking towards victory. I've got Labor now up to 80 seats. Now we're getting a few Queensland figures in. Now, I'm not getting 16 gains at this stage. I'm getting 9, 12. I'm getting 14 seats gained by Labor, but I've got another 8 seats held by the Liberal Party, which the Labor Party is ahead in. I'm not seeing any Labor-held seat which the Coalition is ahead in. So if I'm seeing something like 20 seats which Labor is tracking towards winning, which would be enough to see a change of government. I'm still cautious on that because there are some early figures there from Queensland. But the swing at the moment is up to 5.3, and we're seeing enough seats for it.
Okay.
And I'm joined now by Senator Kate Lundy and Senator Mitch Fifield, who we saw before. But Kate, you've just come into the equation here. You've been sitting watching this from behind the scenes. Give us your fresh look on what you think is going on.
Well, it's obviously looking very strong for us in Victoria and New South Wales, and really interesting seeing some early figures coming in from Queensland, particularly in the coastal seats, where the pattern in New South Wales seems to be flowing through, but perhaps early signs of an even stronger result along the coast in Queensland.
I think Anthony came very close there to suggesting Labor is almost in a position to form a government. Not quite, but it's starting to look like that will happen.
Well, let's hope so. I think Queensland will be very interesting, and it's only very, very early numbers there, so far too early to see if that swing is flowing through to the extent that we need it.
Mitch Fifield, too early to call still for you?
Too early. It ain't over for the government yet.
It certainly isn't over for Lazarus with a triple bypass in Bennelong, who seems to be just holding on. What is your sense about what's going on there?
Well, he's a fighter. We're still in with a big chance in Bennelong. Certainly wouldn't concede it as yet. As I mentioned earlier, there's a record number of pre-poll and postal votes at this election, increase of something of the order of 40%. So I think we're still in with a very good chance in Bennelong.
Let's start thinking about the implications, though, of what appears to be happening, the big trends that are going on at the moment. And of course, you know Peter Costello very well. If the Prime Minister did fall in Bennelong, would he immediately take over, remain as opposition leader if there was a change of government?
Well, we're not conceding the election, and we're not conceding Bennelong by any means. If John Howard fell short, we would all be gutted, but we're not conceding that or entertaining anything beyond that at the moment.
One thing that you don't have to concede, Malcolm Turnbull looks like he's actually retained his position in Wentworth. So there you have a ready-made potential leadership contender. There's actually one in a tight marginal seat. He's done what the Prime Minister is promising to do or trying to do.
Well, Malcolm's a good man, and we need our people in every seat to win. But what I am wondering as I sit here tonight is the extent, particularly in New South Wales, to which the Lindsay episode has been an unhelpful factor in the last few days, and even I must say the interview of the former member for Lindsay on AM the morning afterwards, incredibly unhelpful and an odd contribution to a campaign.
You're starting to sense that things like that in the last week made a big difference. But if you look back through the campaign, there were gaffes and problems right the way through it.
Well, in a campaign, both parties will have their ups and downs and things which are less than perfect, but I think that the Lindsay episode and the attempted explanation of it afterwards really stands out above anything on either side as something particularly damaging.
Kate Lundy, what do you think about that?
Look, I agree. I think the momentum in the last week is very important. We know a lot of people were still undecided, and to have that occur, that stupidity out in Lindsay. The other thing I can't help but thinking is that it put everyone else on notice. If the Liberals were planning similar stunts elsewhere, it certainly prevented that from happening.
All right, thanks to both of you. We'll leave you there and we'll come back to you later.
Okay, let's step back, take a look at the big picture, with Queensland starting to flow through into the national figures. We're now looking with 34.8% of the vote counted, including a small percentage from Queensland. The Labor Party in two-party preferred terms now has 52.6% of the vote. The Liberal Party 47.4%. The big question is, that is a swing of 5.4%, but the big question is how that will translate in actual seats. And to do that, let's look at seats that we're saying have changed hands. If we can have our scoreboard graphic, which seems to be a little bit slow coming. Here it is. Liberal Party, 36.2% of the primary vote. It has 47 seats and it's lost 14 seats. We're saying that the Liberals have lost 14. The Nationals, 5.3%, and we've lost that chamber. We've lost that graphic again. We're saying the Nationals, with 5.3% of the primary vote, have 10 seats but have lost 2. The Labor Party, we're saying, with 43.3% of the primary vote, has 71 seats and has gained 16. Now, in one sense, if you say it's gained 16, don't jump to the conclusion that that means they've won government, because we're still only giving them 71 seats at this point. But I think, Anthony, you're saying there's another 8 where Labor are ahead.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing at the moment, just to break that swing down across the country, we're seeing a swing of 6% in New South Wales. We're seeing a swing of 5.1 in Victoria. Because the problem with 5.1 in Victoria, it's not the point where they start to win seats in Victoria. We're seeing 2.2 in Tasmania, but it's certainly enough to gain Bass and Braddon by the look of it. We're seeing a 2% in the ACT, 6.7 in South Australia, which is getting up towards where more seats start to fall. And on the early figures, we've got 6% counted in Queensland. We're looking at a swing of 6.3% in Queensland. Now, what that translates to in terms of seats is on the chamber, we're seeing that we're definitely prepared to give away. Here we go. We are giving away 71 seats to Labor Liberal 47, Nationals 10 and others 2. Now we're prepared to do a prediction for the first time tonight. At this stage we are looking like 82 seats for Labor, and that gives Labor a majority of 14 seats at this stage. Now there may be a bit of moving up and down on that, but at this stage that is settling down. If Labor starts to slip behind in a few Queensland seats, then maybe Western Australia will matter. But at this stage, it's continuing to track towards a Labor government.
OK, now, Anthony, let's just try and put this into a bit of historical perspective. Once you get to a stage like this where the computer is throwing up that prediction, as you say, you'll see some swirls and eddies, but are you saying that on past performance that is a pretty reliable picture?
The picture I'm seeing is that the government is behind in everything, in all the seats that Labor needs to win, or in many seats that Labor needs to win. There's enough seats where the Labor Party is either we've already got them tracked for winning, we've got them gaining 16, though I'm always prepared to say that's up or down too, but they're also ahead in 6 other seats which we still class as doubtful, which were Liberal held. So that's why on this sort of basis, this is a probability-based exercise, they're not going to suddenly turn around in those.
Can we... Sorry, Julie, you were going...
is worth a look at, I think, on your figures, and I've got... sorry, let me just check. 5% counted, 3 booths, showing a 10.4% swing.
Yeah, Longman is definitely in trouble for Malbrough. The primary vote swing is enormous at the moment, but I think we've got some changing...
That's with nearly 6% counted. Let's have a look at the changing graphic.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get some advice. I mean, I've got 2 pages here, but why have we only got 1 page?
That's all right. Just go through what we have.
This is not the list. I'll go off what I've got on my computer here, which is I've got the Labor Party gaining Wakefield, they're gaining Parramatta, they're gaining Page, they're gaining Macon. Longman I'll pause on. Lindsay's falling. Leichhardt Labor is currently ahead. I'm not prepared to give that one away. Labor has gained Kingston, they've gained Eden Monero, they've gained DeBell, they've gained Deakin, which is above the swing in Victoria. Dawson, the Labor Party is still romping ahead in Dawson. Corangamite has fallen to the Labor Party. Braddon has fallen to Labor. Bonner has fallen to Labor. And Bass. So I think that's about 14 seats.
OK, well, look, let's take a look at the seat of Dobell. This is one that Labor was certainly hopeful of. It's been held by Ken Ticehurst since 2001 on a margin of 4.8%. This is on New South Wales Central Coast. And with 54.5% of the vote counted. Anthony?
Ken Ticehurst won this in 2001. He defeated Michael Lee, former minister in the Keating and Hawke governments. Craig Thompson's the Labor Party candidate. His primary vote is well ahead at this stage. He's got a significant swing to him on the primary votes. And at this stage, we're predicting that with a distribution of preferences, my computer froze for a moment. 7.5% swing, and we're marking that down as a Labor gain.
And we're in fact joined by Ken Ticehurst. He's in the Grand Hotel in Wyong, I believe. Ken, are you prepared to concede? We're saying with a 7-point swing against you, with more than 50% of the vote, you've lost the seat.
Well, it's early days yet. There's still more to come. There's been lots of postal pre-poll votes. So we'll just be waiting on to see what happens a little bit more, but we're very confident holding it.
Obviously your supporters are there and very confident, but a 7.5% swing is pretty dramatic, Ken.
Well, it probably is, but I mean, we've done lots of work up here in the area of Dobell, and we're hoping that these other booths that haven't come in yet will certainly show that commitment we've made.
There's a bit of a trend going on some of these coastal seats swinging across to Labor. Do you feel that you are perhaps part of that trend?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen figures for a little while now. I've been waiting here doing a number of crosses, so I'm not sure what that my scrutiny is for a little while now. So I need to talk to them, and then I'll know a little bit more about where we're tracking.
Let me ask you, what do you think were the most difficult issues for you to control in your electorate? Was it the interest rate rise? Was it, as we've been hearing, problems that have gone on in the campaign, and particularly the very nasty events in the seat of Lindsay only in the past few days?
Well, I think the biggest issue we faced here today was the sheer weight of numbers that was presented by Labor candidates. I mean, they bussed lots of people into the area, and they had a very big presence there with people wearing the second brand for Labor, and so I guess those sort of things can certainly help on the day.
Ken, do you feel the national campaign had little effect on what's happening or happened to you with this large swing against you?
Well, I think we had a very prominent media campaign on a presidential style, and certainly that would have had some effect. But we're just hopeful that what we've been able to achieve here locally, that people will look at a local candidate rather than somebody who's not a local.
You're not alone, it has to be said, Ken. The Prime Minister in a marginal seat is fighting for his political life as we speak, and still behind, as it turns out. Are you worried that your leader may lose his seat?
No, well, I haven't seen the figures there, but it's a long way to go. It might be a long night, and then, of course, first time round was 10 days before the poll was declared, so perhaps we might be in for a long counting after the event. Who knows?
Just to confirm, you're not prepared to concede defeat at the present moment?
Not at all, not at all. Too early to tell.
All right, Ken Ticehurst, we thank you very much for joining us.
And we might continue our seat run now. We're getting more figures in, and the picture, I think, is starting to become clearer. Let's look at the seat of Longman. This is based around Caboolture and the southern Sunshine Coast, north of Brisbane. Mel Bruff, as we know, Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, he's held the seat since 1996 by a margin of 6.7%. 6.3% of the vote counted. There is a very substantial swing to Labor, it would seem. Anthony.
And Mel Bruff is in a deal of trouble. The Labor Party primary vote is up 12%. Wow. And the Liberal Party primary vote is down 6%. Now, that's put John Sullivan well ahead. Now, the primary percentages are not always a very reliable guide here. I'm actually talking about primary vote change. But we now have one preference booth in, which has brought the swing down to 7.9. But on the primary votes I was seeing, that was actually a larger swing. And at this stage, that's in doubt, but the Labor Party is ahead. So that's a significant swing in that seat.
Now, Leichhardt, right up in the far north of Queensland, based around Cairns and Cape York, held by Warren Inch for how long? Since 1996. With a margin of 10.3%, but it's only 3.3% of the vote counted, but already we're showing quite a very substantial swing.
Yes, and these booths, we're seeing a change in the percentage primary votes here. On those votes there, you can see that Jim Turner's on 44% and Charlie McKillop, the Liberal, on 34.8%, the National on 4.2%. We've got a preference count in 4 of 55 booths. There are a couple of... That's not correct. I'll explain what's happening here. If you can cut away from that graphic, please. The swing is 13.9. I'm not sure.
Here, Anthony.
I'm not sure where that one came from. The swing is 13.9 on the figures I've got, but that is an enormous swing. There is certainly, I think that might be just one. I've just got another update, and it's 13.6. So Labor's on track to win Leichhardt at this stage, I'd say.
Now Dawson, just south of Leichhardt, and this is Deanne Kelly's seat. She's held it since 96. There's a big move on here.
There's an enormous move on.
Got a margin of 10%, but a very big swing.
Labor Party looks set to win this seat at this stage. We've got a preference count in a third of the booths in this electorate. And at this stage, Deanne Kelly's on 46.3 to James Bidgood 44.5. But when we factor in the booths, and in fact we've got 22 preference booths, we're seeing a 12.9% swing. That is an enormous swing, and it's been consistent all night in that electorate. So Deanne Kelly at this stage looks like losing to James Bidgood, a Mackay City councillor who's a finance director for a chain of local medical centres. So that is quite an upset.
This is really interesting that in the north you've got these big swings, big early swings, yet down in Brisbane it's a much more patchy picture. You've got the seat of Bowman, for instance, Brisbane's southeastern Bayside suburbs. Bowman held by Andrew Laming since 2004. Fair to say that he's struck a degree of trouble. A margin of 8.9%, and even despite that margin, Labor was feeling somewhat confident about this seat, but the swing has not really eventuated to that extent, with 14.8% of the vote counted.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing at this stage is that Andrew Laming is ahead on the primary votes by about 200 votes. There's a vote there with the Greens, which is about 6.5%. But this is a seat with a margin of 8.9, and we're not seeing an 8.9% swing. We've got a preference count in 6 of 32 booths. We're seeing a swing of 6.1%, but that's not enough to actually deliver the seat. There's a bit more counting to come in that electorate, but on first fingers it looks like Andrew Laming would be returned.
OK, well, let's take a look now at the seat of Moreton. This is Brisbane's inner southern suburbs. It's been held by Gary Hargrave since 1996. He's currently got a margin of 2.8% with 14.3% of the vote counted. There is a swing of more than 4%.
Yes, and at this stage he's on track to lose this seat. We've got, as I said, 8.8% counted, 12 of 35 primary booths, and there's a swing of about 3 to 5% on the primaries from Liberal to Labor. But when we factor in the preferences, we've got a preference count in 9 of the 35 booths, 3.1% swing there. I've got a later figure with 4.3, which is pushing it into the Labor, a bit more towards Labor. So we're not giving that one away yet, but again, it's another seat that the Labor Party's leading in.
Julia Gillard, can you, have you got an explanation as to why you're seeing, admittedly an early swing, but nonetheless, 13.3% swing or 13.6% swing in Leichhardt around Cairns and a swing of 13% in Dawson?
Well, I think Dawson, there's a demographic shift going on. The resources boom is bringing in more working people, and I think those working people are rewarding us with their votes. I think industrial relations would be playing a big part in that. In Leichhardt, of course, you had a fairly messy campaign between the Liberal candidate and the National Party candidate, with some odd insults exchanged, including the suggestion that a woman couldn't represent that seat. So I think we're probably seeing some of that in play, and the loss of an incumbent. I've got some figures on Flynn. Flynn's the newly created seat, bigger than the state of Victoria, so not an easy place to campaign. We need 7.7 off the extrapolation from last time. We're getting 7.4 with 10,000 votes counted, but they are 34 small booths. We haven't seen Emerald and Gladstone come in yet. Right. Our candidate there, Chris Trevor, Gladstone-based. He's run for the state seat of Gladstone in the past and got an extraordinary swing to him, more than 10%, very well known local, known as CT. It's one of the seats where we obviously worried about the amalgamation agenda playing in, but that makes it well and truly worth keeping an eye on as Emerald and Gladstone South come in.
Okay, Nick, have you got can you understand why that big swing seems to be on in North Queensland?
Well, it is all over the place. I'm just looking at Hinkler, which is based on Bundaberg. Sitting member Paul Neville, the swing against him's only 3.5% with a quarter of the vote counted. So I think Julia's right. This can be explained by local factors, and it is all over the place. We were, frankly, always worried about Leichhardt with Warren Inch going. He's one of the most popular members in the Parliament with a huge personal vote. And as Julia says, a little messy on the ground. Dawson, I find difficult to understand. Deanne Kelly would be one of our better members. I think Julia's probably right that there is demographic change there. The seats composition is changing a lot. Starting from a high base, I think you're seeing a change in the nature of the electorate. Yeah. That's obviously working its way through, and we can talk later about the work choices and industrial relations, but in a seat that's got a change in the composition of the workforce of that kind, from farmers, small business to people working in mining and things, you can see a change of this kind.
What about Longman, Nick?
Well, again, you see out of Brisbane, mortgage belt seat. The reality is that last time interest rates worked very well for us as an issue, without question. Interest rate increases since then and Labor's campaign on the issue have meant that mortgage belt seats like Longman were always going to be pretty tricky tonight. I hope and pray Mal will hang on. I wouldn't concede that seat by any means, but it's one of those outer suburban mortgage belt seats that was going to be difficult for us tonight.
Makes you wonder what might have happened if he hadn't had the profile he did, which I would have thought would have gone down pretty well in Queensland around the intervention in the Territory.
I would think so, yeah.
Very specific acknowledgement during the campaign launch from the Prime Minister to Mal Brough. So
there's the Mal Brough fan club, there.
Maybe that didn't help him.
Are we ready for another seat run? Can we keep going? Let's look at the seat of Hinkler then. This is around Bundaberg and Hervey Bay.
Yep.
Good country. The local member, Paul Neville, since 1993. Yeah. He's on a margin of 8.3%, and it looks like he'll probably keep it.
Yeah, this was the seat where the Gary Parr, the Labor candidate, had some controversy for calling some parents of a British serviceman warmongers, and had to apologise for that. It does seem to, I don't know whether that's affected the result, but certainly in 6 of 46 booths we're seeing a swing of 4.2%. This was a seat that looked like it had moved out of Labor's range. We've got the swing now up to 4.2, but still not enough to risk that seat, and it looks like Paul Neville should be returned as the member for Hinkler.
Okay, the seat of Flynn, we mentioned this as well. Julia Gillard was talking about Flynn. Central Queensland, centred around Gladstone. This is a new seat with no sitting MP. On paper, it should be a National Party seat around a margin of 7.7 We've now had 20.6% of the vote counted. Anthony?
And of course, there's a Labor, a Liberal and a National contesting in this seat. And what we're seeing here is Chris Trevor's ahead on 46.3 to 34.3 for Glenn Churchill, 12 with the Liberal there. It's factoring into a 7.1% swing, Labor just behind. So at this stage, that seat is in doubt. We can't call the contest between Glenn Churchill and Chris Trevor.
Okay, the seat of Petrie. This was another seat that the Liberals have poured a lot of effort into defending for Teresa Gambaro, who's held it since 1996, margin of 7.5%. 7.5% of the vote counted now, and this is going to be a very tight seat.
Well, we've got 5 of 35 booths, and we're seeing, again, we're getting an awful lot of very slow counts tonight, unfortunately, which is always makes it hard to call an election. But I'll have to follow the numbers here. Yvette Darth still ahead on the primary votes, 41% for Teresa Gambaro. And at this stage, we're seeing Labor just ahead, a swing which is big enough to change, but at this stage it's wise to leave that one still in doubt.
Okay, Julia Gillard, you must be getting close to a point where you'd be feeling pretty good.
Yes, I am. I'm a cautious...
This is my gentle way of trying to ease you across the line.
I'm a cautious type, Kerry, but I'd say on the numbers we're seeing tonight, Labor is going to form a government. It's a question of the margin now.
Just point out that our bottom of frame has ticked over to 76 seats for Labor, so we're definitely giving 76 seats away.
There was a wonderful piece of synchronicity there, because it was happening at the very point that Julia Gillard was saying that she believes Labor will form a government. Nick Minchin?
I don't think Nick's ready to pack it in yet.
I'm not yet prepared to make that concession. Clearly there's a pretty strong swing for Labor, but I wouldn't concede the 16 net seats, and we've seen nothing from the West yet.
Okay, now in the context, I want to keep coming back to Bennelong until it's very clear what's happening there. I'm not sure whether there's a graphic ready to go up, but let's look at the seat of Bennelong, because this is John Howard's seat, 4.1% margin, Sydney's North Shore. There's now 53.2% of the vote counted, and there is a 5.1% swing to the ALP. Anthony?
Yeah, well, this is a seat which is continuing to I've forgotten the word, shift backwards and forwards in the swing slightly. We now have a count in 24 of the 47 booths after preferences, and it is showing the swing is 5.1%. As you can see the graphic here, John Howard up against Maxine McHugh, that on the primary votes that we're seeing at the moment, Maxine McHugh is ahead on the primary votes. But the audience back there is not really paying attention to the numbers, because what's important to look at is the swing figure that we're seeing here. And at this stage, we're seeing a swing of 5.2, and the Labor Party is ahead at this stage. Can't call that seat.
This noise is going to begin to be a problem, because I can't even hear my fellow panellists, let alone anything coming from our control room. So, I wonder if that's got anything to do with the chaser. In which case, could they take their fun to the other end of the tally room? Is there any point in me talking just at the minute? Nick Minchin, just very quickly, let's just finish our discussion about Bennelong, because I want to move on. But you're continuing to say that postal votes could play
to concede the seat.
No,
we think there'll be a 1% gain to us on postals, which would make the seat absolutely line ball. Even on these figures, it's line ball on the primaries. Of course, it's only green preferences showing it going to Labor, but I think we're going to have to wait for the postals.
At what point do you see? Do you think the percentage becomes a Labor gain?
I think you'd have to go to 6.1 before you'd say that Labor looks likely.
Okay.
I don't. On these figures, with half counted, I don't think you'll be able to call this tonight.
No. Okay. Well, look. What we want to do now is take a look at some of what have become known as the battler seats. These are the seats where John Howard attracted what became known as Labor's battler vote. They were seats that he captured in 1996 and has pretty much held until now. Michael Brissenden has been looking at what's been going on in those seats tonight. And Michael, take it away.
Well, Kerry, as you say, these are the seats that switched in 1996 in the big swing away from Paul Keating, and they've been known ever since as the Howard battler seats. In Victoria, Phil Baresi was one of the class of 96, and in the seat of Deakin, a 7% swing to the Labor candidate Mike Simon has ensured that Labor will win that. In McEwen, Fran Bailey looks pretty safe actually, with a swing of about 5% against her. And in Latrobe, Jason Wood is also looking pretty safe, but Labor still saying they have a chance in Latrobe. Now in New South Wales, we've been a lot of discussion about this seat tonight, the most iconic battler seat of all, the seat of Lindsay. Karen Titchov running for the Liberal Party this time, but held since '96 by Howard favourite Jackie Kelly. She personified the shift to the Liberal Party in this demographic. This was the seat where we saw the scandal, of course, in the last few days over the racist flyers distributed by the husband and the husband of her replacement, Karen Titchov. David Bradbury has easily won this. Elsewhere in battler territory in New South Wales, Robertson on the Central Coast, held by Jim Lloyd, perhaps one of the more accident-prone of the Howard Outer Ministry. Labor looks like it's just ahead here. But in the southern Sydney seat of Hughes, Dana Vale looks very safe, a swing to Labor of 6%. In Queensland, we've been getting some figures in, of course, in Queensland. It's early days, but there are a number of these battler aspirational seats that will be important. In Moreton, Gary Hargrave looks like he's lost that, as expected. In Herbert, Peter Lindsay is ahead, but perhaps in trouble. And in Leichhardt, Labor, that looks like a safe Labor game. So it's a bit hard to tell how far the battler seats are shifting, but it's clear that not all of them are returning to Labor, Kerry.
Okay, Julia Gillard, things are starting to ferment now, and you've said you're confident that you'll form a Labor government. Anthony's prediction seems to carry that out. What would you nominate as the single most important issue of this campaign that has put Labor across the line?
I think the thing that first caused the so-called Howard battlers to look at the government again and not like what they saw was work choices. I think that really did crack a substantial proportion of the so-called Howard battlers off. Once they saw one flaw, then they started looking for a few more. So people re-engaged with politics. Then climate change undoubtedly became a template as to how the government had grown stale in office. And then the government lost touch on a series of cost of living issues, and the puffed up claims about interest rates from the last campaign came back to bite them very strongly during this campaign. I think Kevin, his leadership since taking over in December, once again people lifted their eyes, they looked at politics again. The contrast saw a bloke who looked like a very safe pair of hands in Kevin Rudd, but a bloke with new energy and new ideas, and he was always hitting the chords with people that they wanted to hear. You know, industrial relations, they didn't want work choices. I think we struck our alternative right. The cost of living issues, Kevin really got out in front on, and climate change he's campaigned on solidly all the way. So it wouldn't have happened without Kevin re-engaging that vote.
I think we've got to assume that Chaser is at work there, but we'll try and press on regardless. Yeah. Nick mentioned, did you see Kevin Rudd coming?
What I didn't see coming was the ALP renter crowd out the back here. Well done, Julia.
But, you're assuming that, but it could be much more to do with what Chaser's up to.
Oh, I see, right. Look, the government actually went behind the Labor Party while Kim Beazley was leading the Labor Party.
But is it fair to say that you were always confident while Kim Beazley was leading?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I mean, winning a fifth term of government in this country is incredibly difficult. I'm not conceding that we've lost, but winning 5 terms has only been done once by any one Prime Minister. That was Sir Robert Menzies. We knew this was going to be very difficult to hang on. We'd had swings to us in the last 2 elections. There was inevitably, I think, going to be a swing back to Labor. I think, without getting into a slangy match with Julia, Labor and the trade union movement very successfully demonised work choices. There's no doubt about that. They made it, the great big bogeyman of this election. And that's been
there
quite
are a lot
tough
of bogeys flying around, Nick.
Well, work choices, I think, was for the Labor Party. That's the thing they've really been focusing on, the union movement threw, $20-30 million at it. That's been very tough for us and not easy to defend our position on industrial relations. So I think that's been, Julia's right to say it's a factor. We can argue why it is a factor, but clearly that's been damaging to us. And then, of course, having won the last election on the issue of interest rate increases since the election were always going to hurt as well, particularly, as I say, in seats like Longman. So without conceding it, we knew we'd go into this, whether it was Kim Beazley Kevin Rudd or Fred Dagg. It was going to be a tough election for us.
Look, I can understand the conundrum, the dilemma that John Howard, Peter Costello and the government had around your own leadership, all tied in with that issue of when was the right time for the transition of leadership. On the one hand, there was clearly an argument of time for a change at the top level, regardless of how well John Howard might have been governing in your terms. But on the other hand, John Howard continued to retain much more popularity than Peter Costello. So in the end, did you as a party and John Howard as leader pull the right rein?
Well, there's a clear consensus in the party that John Howard should lead us to this election. He's been the most successful Prime Minister we've had since Robert Menzies. His own approval ratings as Prime Minister and preferred Prime Minister have been consistently good, as you say. So there was no doubt within the party a very strong view that the person to go to this election with was John Howard. And as I say, we still haven't conceded defeat yet, but, so I think it's very easy to go on with hindsight, but I just emphasise that position. And John Howard has been, in our party room, an incredibly successful Prime Minister. So that consensus prevailed. And I think, it's been a tough campaign. I think John Howard has again... Can I just say, John Howard's campaign has been a stunningly energetic, powerful, good campaign.
I wonder if part of the judgment that those Australians who've changed their vote at this election, I wonder how much of their judgment might have been based on the percentage of your campaign that was negative. There was a very, very strong negative component of your... I mean, you had your positive message that came out there every time, but a very strong negative threat as well, sure.
Well, but let's not pretend that the Labor Party campaign was anything other than
yes, but they're
negative.
winning. They're winning.
I don't know if you saw the ads on commercial TV, Kerry, but they were pretty negative ads. I really think, in reality, the balance between positive and negative of both campaigns was very similar.
Cancelled itself out.
I think so.
OK, well, look, we'll keep talking, but we're going to take a look at the big picture again, which will tell the story. We've got 50% of the vote counted. We're still waiting for Perth to kick in now, and we haven't heard from the Northern Territory yet, but 50% of the vote counted, and Labor has in two-party preferred terms, has 52.9% of the vote. It's creeping up to that 53%. The Coalition, 47.1%. That is a swing to the Labor Party of 5.7%. Now, if we can just look at where some of those seats have changed, we see from this scoreboard that the Liberals have their primary vote has stayed around 36.3 all night. That gives them 47 seats, and we're saying that they've lost 20 seats. The Nationals, 5.3% of the primary vote. We're saying they've won 10 but lost 2. The Labor Party, we're saying, has 43.5% of the primary vote. We're saying they've won 79 seats. And that is a gain. That includes a gain of 22 seats. The Green vote, incidentally, primary vote, 7.8%. Now, Anthony, can we take a look at what the Chamber gives to each party in terms of actual seats and its prediction?
We've got a seats we're definitely giving as a win. We're giving the Labor Party 79 seats, which is enough to form government. And these are seats we're definitely giving away. The Coalition has 57, and there's 2 others. And we're prepared to make a prediction at this stage, and that prediction is 85, 10, 53. And I can say...
Sorry about that.
One of our panellists has attracted a bit of attention on the tally room floor.
Look, I think I've got to say, this is...
We can't yet call her Deputy Prime Minister-elect.
This is one of the reasons why the tally room is probably at risk.
They're not moved. So what you're saying, Anthony, was that on your prediction you're giving 85 seats to Labor?
Yep. Well, we look at some changing graphics. Now, we'll bring up the changings one after the other, and I'll actually run through them state by state. In Victoria, we're giving Labor Corangamite and Deakin with Latrobe in doubt. In Tasmania, we're giving Bass and Braddon to Labor. In New South Wales, Page, Eden Monaro, DeBell, Parramatta, Lindsay. We've got Kingston, Wakefield and Macon in South Australia. So we're seeing something like 20-odd seats fall at this stage. So we've got more seats falling in Queensland. I've got Longman, Dawson, Leichhardt, Bonner, Blair, Ford, big swing in Ford and Moreton. So So as we're seeing the Queensland figures coming in, the victory is starting to become more emphatic, and the Labor Party is picking up seats way beyond the 5% swing that was required.
Okay, Bennelong continues to be fascinating because John Howard, if those are people cheering the loss of the Prime Minister's seat, they may yet be cheering too soon. Nick Minchin has already warned that there's going to be a very strong postal vote factor in this seat, and with 60% of the vote counted and a margin of 4.1%, the swing to the ABC, the swing that was going to happen at some point tonight, the swing to the ALP is 5%. Nick, your contention is...
Well, that swing's actually narrowing.
Yeah.
It was 5.1, it's come back to 5.
It's moved down below 5, It's gone above 5, it's moving around quite significantly.
I think based on what I've seen of the postals, I think...
Seats like Hindmarsh and Adelaide, where the Liberal Party have been extremely strong postal vote campaigns with a sitting member, have been behind 49 on the night and scraped into victory. But John Howard probably can win from that, but it's going to be an extremely narrow, and you wouldn't want a by-election.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Andy.
Something to think about.
But whatever the computer is saying, on the basis of what Nick is warning about with significant postal votes, you'd say that Bennelong very clearly is out there on its own for the moment.
It's in the undecided category.
Very much in the undecided category. Julia Gillard, you're not counting Bennelong amongst your definite gains just yet, are you?
No, I'm not. I think we're going to have to keep watching it, but for the Prime Minister to be in a situation where he may be hanging on postal votes, I think says something in itself. And can I say on Nick's analysis, I think part of the problem for the Liberal Party is that there was a contradiction at the heart of their campaign. They never knew whether they were saying we're going for growth or there are dark clouds ahead. They were contradictory messages, and I do think the sort of shambles that degenerated around the Liberal leadership transition cost them dearly as well. And I think one ongoing problem for the Liberal Party is Peter Costello is not popular with the Australian community. I think, you know, there's going to be a rewriting of history now about would it all have been different if Peter had been in the chair. I think it would have been worse if Peter had been in the chair.
That's not just you moving on to your next target, is it, Julia?
No, it's a genuine take on how people see him.
We might now take a look. We're going to go back and look at some of these other seats that have now built quite a substantial count. The seat of Bass around Launceston and northeastern Tasmania, 80% of the vote counted. Was a Liberal seat held by Michael Ferguson since 2004, a margin of 2.6%. That seat, we would say, is now gone.
Yes, well, on the primary votes, you can see that Michael Ferguson is ahead on the primaries by about 3,000 there, but there's nearly 8,000 votes there with the Greens, and those preferences will favour Jodie Campbell very strongly. And at this stage, we've got a preference count in 48 of the 50 booths, and it's indicating a 3.5% swing. Again, if it's under 1%, an extraordinary postal vote campaign would assist you. But at this stage, it looks like Jodie Campbell, is the former Launceston Mayor, Deputy Mayor, is the new member for Bass.
Well, we in fact have Michael Ferguson, the member for Bass, who may just have lost his seat, on the line now. Michael, are you one of those who now, with 80% of the vote counted and the swing against you, is prepared in fact to concede?
Not at all. The swing in Bass at the moment is around about 3%. That compares pretty well with a national swing of 5 or 6%, so we've held our ground extremely well here. But what is hurting, clearly, as you've said, is the Green vote. We were well ahead on primaries, which is personally very satisfying, but still with 20% of the vote unaccounted for, I'm not yet prepared to concede at all. In fact, I remain quite hopeful.
How do you account for this very substantial, nearly 15% Green vote? Surely it's got something to do with the pulp mill.
Well, it does clearly have something to do with the pulp mill, but Bass is a seat which takes account of all of the issues that are current in the day. But with the Greens, they haven't polled as well as recent polls were suggesting they would, and we have held our ground here quite substantially. We've got a very good primary vote, and on the two-party preferred, I think that indicates that we're getting around about 1/3 of the Green preferences flowing my way. So still, as I say, with 20% of the vote to come, and I'm only 1.2% behind, I think I'm still ready to hang on just for a bit longer yet.
Michael, how long do you think you might hang on with 80% counted? I mean, those preferences are flowing very strongly back to Labor. There's no question about that. I mean, if you get to 100%, you're still 3.5% or 3.5% behind. Are you going to be relying on postal votes like some others?
Well, clearly I will be, yes. And with 20% of the vote to come, I think that's a fair swag. That's 14,000 votes. Let's wait till they come in.
All right, Michael Ferguson, we'll leave you there. Thanks very much for joining us.
OK, we're going to continue our seat run. We're going to slip back to South Australia and look at some of those seats that are still in play. The seat of Boothby, held by the Liberal Party on a margin of 5.4% by Andrew Southcott. This is in Adelaide's southern suburbs, with 65% of the vote counted now. The swing to Labor is not going to be enough, it would seem.
Yes, no, Nicole Corns is got a swing to her for the Labor Party, but it's certainly not as big as other electorates in South Australia. Andrew Southcott's 45.9, Nicole Corns 34.6. And at this stage, you'd have to say that this is going to be retained by the Liberal Party, and Andrew Southcott is back in Parliament. It's much closer in nearby Sturt, but which...
On that, I'll just make the point that the Labor vote has actually gone backwards on primaries in Boothby. So really, this has been a disaster to pre-select Nicole Corns.
Well, it's certainly gone against the trend.
Yeah, and it's a great result for Andrew Southcott.
We might take a look at the seat of Macon. This is in Adelaide's northeastern suburbs. And there is a very big swing to Labor comparatively here. Trish Draper was retiring at this election. A margin of only 0.9% with 73% of the vote counted. Big swing, Anthony.
Well, Trish Draper, she had to swing against her last time. She had some problems in the last term of Parliament. She chose to retire at this election. Tony Zappia's got over 50% of the primary vote. He's romping to victory against Bob Day, who's spent a lot of his own money on that campaign.
In trouble.
And at this stage, I'd have to say that that's a safe Labor gain.
OK, now back to Queensland. The seat of Dixon. This is Brisbane's outer northern suburbs, and it now spreads out into the bush to as far as Esk, and held by Peter Dixon, who's the Assistant Treasurer. He took this seat from Cheryl Curnow in 2001. He went into this election with a margin of 8.9%, but with 23% of the vote counted. The swing is
the figure is
very uncomfortable for him.
Yes, well, I wouldn't necessarily call this swing reliable. Fiona McNamara is ahead on the primary votes, which is it's about 45% each there, 10% off of the minor parties, 5.7 with the Greens, and we've got 7 of the 34 booths, and it's showing 50.2, so there's a 9% swing in that electorate, so that one's in doubt at this stage.
OK, now a really interesting seat, the seat of Ford. Southern Queensland, outer southern Brisbane. The Liberals hold this with a margin of 11.5%, but Kay Elson is retiring from the Parliament. 11.5% margin, only 6% of the vote counted, certainly, but at this early stage, a swing to the Labor Party of nearly 13%.
Well, Kay Elson's been one of the bookend seats, as we've called them. She was elected in 1996. Wendy Crichton's the new Liberal candidate, up against Wendy Creighton, against Brett Ragoose, who's a teacher and ex-graphic artist. We're seeing a 12.9% swing, which is putting this seat in doubt. And this is a seat which has required a huge swing. So at this stage, this seat is in doubt.
OK, for the first time, we're going to take a look at Solomon. In the Northern Territory. This is based around Darwin, Palmerston. Dave Tollner holds this seat for the Country Liberal Party, which is a kind of amalgam of the coalition parties. He holds this seat with 2.8%. This was a seat Labor also wanted. 16.7% of the vote counted. The swing thus far is not great, but tell us about the seat, Anthony.
Dave Tollner is... He's ahead on the primary votes at this stage, nearly 50% of the primary. I can't tell you where those booths are from, but we've got a preference count in 4 of the 24. And at this stage, 51.8. We've got the CLP ahead, so we're not giving that seat away yet at this stage. But there's a 1% swing to Labor. There's only 4 of the 24 booths in at this stage.
I've now got Victorian Liberal Senator Judith Troth here, and Stephen Smith has joined us once again, having made his bold prediction earlier. Judith, how are you feeling? That's what I want to know. And how do you gear yourself up for something like this, which I think you were saying before, pretty much you felt may well have been inevitable?
Well, as Nick Minchin said before, this is our 5th election campaign as a government, and increasingly it would become harder. I think with the opinion polls running the way they have, there's no doubt that many of us who've been in government and in Parliament for some time, you never get philosophical about it, but you're emotionally prepared in some way, and therefore it is democracy at work, and you accept what happens. But
sounds like you're accepting defeat.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Many of those seats, as Nick Minchin has said, still have to count pre-poll and posting. I know in the 2 seats that I was looking after, Melbourne Ports and Melbourne, there were, I think, double the number of postal votes that there were before, double the number of pre-polls. So let's see what they do.
All right, just let me get this straight. You've emotionally prepared yourself for defeat, but you're not actually saying you've been defeated at this point.
Never give in is one of my mottos.
All right, Stephen Smith, you've been out looking now at the seats, at the big picture. Tell us what you've come back with. I see your little bit of paper here with all its numbers on it, and I'm very interested because we hear what Anthony is saying. I'm interested in your version of events.
Well, I haven't heard what Anthony's had to say, but it's the same piece of paper I started with, and I still think we're on track. I've got us with a definite 12 going into Queensland and a possible 2 more, Bennelong and Robertson, and Sturt as an outsider. So there's a definite dozen going into Queensland. I think in Queensland, Bonner, Morton and Blair and Longman we've got. I think Leichhardt and Dawson we've got. And I think Flynn we're knocking on the door as we potentially are in Petrie. So we're on track to, I think, win, and on track to get a net gain of 20. Having said that, Solomon looks, very close. And
Dane Tollner's ahead, actually, yes, by the look of it. I mean, it's hard to see that being pegged back.
I need to have a closer look at it. And I was rudely on the phone when you were interviewing Judith, but it was my own seat, and 3 small booths in, and there's either a 1% swing against us on our primary or a 1% swing in our favour on our primary. I don't have any Green primary votes, so I can't make that judgment. But that would accord that in the West, in those 4 crunch seats, Swan, Cowan, Stirling and Hasluck, it's going to be knife edge either way. So
you're saying we still may have to wait, see what's going on in the West in case there's a swing back against you, where some people expect it.
I want to make sure that out of Queensland going into the Northern Territory and the West, that we've got 18, 19, 20 seats. That's the ambition.
Just in case.
Just in case.
All right, we're going to go back to Kerry.
OK, we're going to take a look at the seat of Lindsay in Sydney, which again is a big part of the story. This is the outer western suburbs of Sydney, very much mortgage belt territory, and marred for the Liberal Party in the dying days of the campaign, making their job even more difficult with that dirty trick story that emerged and gave the Prime Minister and others in his party so much of a headache. Jackie Kelly retiring in this election, a margin of 2.9%. 65% of the vote counted, a big swing on, Anthony.
Yes, well, there's certainly an enormous swing here. And on the primary votes, David Bradbury, who's been defeated by Jackie Kelly twice, he's romping ahead more than 50% of the primary vote. And what's going to happen is after the distribution of preferences, that we are saying with 28 of 36 booths counted for preferences, there's a 9.7% swing to the Labor Party. And David Bradbury, at his 3rd attempt, wins election for the seat of Lindsay.
And we are able to go straight to David Bradbury, and by the look of it, David's family. If you can hear me there, David. Can you hear me there, David? We can see you. David Bradbury, can you hear me? He can't hear us quite yet, Kerry. We'll come back to that.
We'll take the opportunity to keep going with seats. I want to have a look at Leichhardt again around Cairns and Cape York, the very northern part of Queensland. Warren Inch, the very popular local member, retiring, but he left a margin of 10.3%. That margin's gone. 26% of the vote counted. Another very big swing.
An enormous swing in this electorate. And it's showing up in both the primary and the two candidate preferred vote there. That Jim Turner, the Labor candidate, 44.7 on the primary votes. His primary vote is up 13, the Liberal primary is down 15, and the Nationals haven't taken any of that slack up, and he's turning into a 14.8% swing, one of the biggest we've seen tonight. And Jim Turner, at his second attempt, he tried last time, he gains his far northern seat for the Labor Party.
Okay, we're going to take our first look at some Western Australian seats. We're going to start with Kalgoorlie, which can be simply described as the Western Australian outback, and we all know what Kalgoorlie itself produces. There's only 1.4% of the vote counted, but these are first figures, so they're interesting. Barry Haas has been the local member since '98. He holds this seat with a margin of 6.3%.
And he's up against Sharon Teal, who's on 55.3 for the Liberals and 38.2. But I mean, in an electorate that covers 90% roughly of Western Australia, I mean, there's booths from everywhere. This is translating into a tiny swing at this stage. You can't really rely on that at this stage. That's no swing at all in that electorate. We're suggesting that Barry Haas will hold on to it. You would want a little bit more counting in such a big electorate.
Okay, the seat of Canning, this is around Perth's southeast suburbs. Don Randall has held this for the Liberals since 2001, currently enjoys a margin of 9.5%. Only 2.4% of the vote counted, but what's it telling us, Anthony?
Well, he's got 6 of the 48 primary booths. We've got 3 of the 48 two-candidate preferred. Those are raw votes, the 44.8 for the Liberals, 11% there for the Greens, which is a significant vote. We're factoring in the preferences in the 3 booths where we have a count from, and at this stage it's looking like a 12.4%. The Labor Party's ahead. We're not giving that seat away. You'd want more booths.
Okay, can we take a look at another Western Australian seat? This is the seat of Brand, where Kim Beazley is the retiring member. A margin of 4.7%. Kim Beazley retiring after 25 years in office, thereabouts. Only 1.1% of the vote counted. Well,
this is one of my pet hates about talking about a seat sometimes where the figures are actually a little bit early. Phil Edmonds well ahead on the primary votes at this stage. We have a preference count in one of the booths, and that is indicating that there is a swing in that one booth of 1.5% to the Liberal Party. So that's sort of just one booth. So it's indicating the Labor Party's ahead. Quite rightly, it's not giving it away, but there'll be a lot more counting in Brand yet.
Okay, the seat of North Sydney. This is Joe Hockey's seat, the Minister for Workplace Relations and therefore Work Choices, the task that he was handed by the Prime Minister when Work Choices was heading south as a political issue for the government. So that was a bit of a mixed blessing for Joe Hockey in terms of his own seat. But 62.4% of the vote counted against the former ABC weatherman Mike Bailey. 10% margin. Anthony?
Well, he's got no difficulty being elected here. Joe Hockey's got 29,350. Mike Bailey's on 36%. Joe Hockey doesn't even need to go to preferences at this stage. I checked my system and see if I got different figures, but it's indicating a 4.8% swing, which is still the figure I have, 4.7. So the Liberal Party will retain North Sydney without too much difficulty.
Now that those Western Australian figures are starting to come in, Nick, it was always the Liberal hope that you would at least hold in Western Australia, and that if you're going to win any seats anywhere, it would be Western Australia. At this stage, the figures, of course, are too early. But what is it that's made Western Australia different?
Well, the state is extraordinarily prosperous at the moment. I think that, if anything, our industrial relations changes work to our advantage in that state. The prosperity which the state is enjoying, I think, is such that much credit is given to our government. I think the Labor Party has had enormous trouble in that state on the domestic front. The Premier, Mr Carpenter, has had some very big and difficult issues to deal with involving our old friend Brian Burke. So I think there's been a lot of factors at play that are localised to Western Australia that have made the situation better for us. You've had, obviously, with Graham Edwards retiring, that's a real opportunity for us. And of course Kim Wilkie only won his seat by 100 votes or something, so we've always seen it as a big opportunity for us just because of the sheer growth and energy and dynamism of that state, and on the other hand the problems that the state Labor government and the state Labor Party have been having.
Okay, and as it transpires, it's almost not going to matter in terms of who forms government tonight. There was a possibility that that we would be hanging on the edge of our seats by the time we came to Western Australia. That isn't the case, but nonetheless there's still the question of whether Labor is able to pick up any seats, whether the Liberals are able to pick up any seats, and who actually ends up with the net gain. Julia Gillard?
Western Australia has always been on a different dynamic than the rest of the country. I mean, the economy there is just so strong. You can feel it in the streets of Western Australia. Consequently, I think the don't risk any change message that the Liberal Party was putting forward in this campaign probably had special resonance there. We also have got a set of unique factors there. I mean, Graham Edwards, you probably couldn't have a person in the federal parliament with more affection from his state and his seat than Graham Edwards. He's been a tremendous representative for Labor in both state and federal politics. So when a figure like him retires from politics, it's a special moment, but it means difficulties with the seat.
A bit like Warren Inch in Leichhardt.
Yeah, Kim Beazley, of course, is in the same category, a giant of Labor politics, a giant of Western Australian politics. And so, with him moving from Brand, we needed to be cautious there. We'll wait and see the results. Obviously, I think that the tempo of it will be a little bit different from the rest of the country. But the same general issues around the country will play out. I think, people are very anxious about making sure there's a government that's got the plans for the future. It will be interesting to see how that plays out in the West.
Okay, well, we might once again pause for a moment and take a look at the national figures that tell the story. And Labor will form a government on all of the figures that are available to us tonight. Western Australia just starting to come in. But with 57%, 58% of the vote counted in two-party preferred terms, Labor has 53% of the vote. The Liberals, the Coalition, 47%. A swing of 5.8. In fact, that swing as we speak goes 54-46, a swing of 6%. The graphic hasn't quite caught up with that yet, but that's the current figures with 70% of the national vote counted. This is very fluid. This is now, so since we started looking at these national figures a little while ago, the two-party preferred victory to Labor has gone from 52 to 53, now to 54% of the two-party preferred vote, which will begin to put Labor's seats up into very big figures indeed. If we can take a look now at the scoreboard graphic, which shows where the seats have gone. Liberals, 36.2% of the primary vote. We're giving them 45 seats. We're saying they've actually lost 20. The Nationals, 5.3%. That we're saying they've won 10 seats, but we're saying that they've lost 3. Labor, 43.7% of the primary vote. Still not quite up where it was in most of the polling prior to the election, but we're giving Labor at this stage 81 seats, a gain of 23 seats. And we're saying that the Green vote overall tonight has been around 7.8% family first, 2%. Now, if we take a look at the chamber graphic, Anthony, which will show us the likely numbers in the parliamentary chamber as we're looking at the figures now.
Well, the seats we're definitely giving away. We are giving the Labor Party a definite 81 seats. They are definitely in government, there's no doubt about it. That's our seats won. We had a couple of seats which are leaning one way or the other. We're making a prediction of where we're going here. 84, 46 to 10. And if we make a prediction overall of where we think it's going, we're seeing the Labor Party up to 87 seats, which is a majority of 22 in the new parliament.
And can we have a look at the changing seats now?
We have Labor gaining Bass, we have Labor gaining Bennelong, Labor getting Blair, Bonner, Bowman, Braddon, Corangamite, Dawson. We'll just move on to the next page. Go again, Deakin, Dixon, DeBell, Eden Monero, Flynn, Ford, Kingston, Leichhardt, and we've actually got a few more to go. We're getting up to 23. Lindsay, Longman, Macon, Moreton, Page, Parramatta, Petrie, where Labor Party is ahead, and we've got Robertson.
And, just in passing, you look at a seat like Ford in the southern area of Brisbane, that is a massive swing. That was a seat the Liberals held with 11.5%. And there's a swing against the government there of 14 point something percent. So we're seeing some we're seeing some sort of patchy outcomes, but we're seeing some quite staggering swings in some individual seats.
Bennelong.
And we'll take a quick look at Bennelong now. John Howard's seat, and with 66.6% of the vote counted, we'll ignore the crowd. We'll try to. With 66.6% of the vote counted, John Howard had a margin of 4.1%. Maxine McHugh has, at this stage, pulled off a swing, we're saying, of 5.3%. Anthony?
Yeah, at this stage, it looks like the Labor Party's ahead, and they're far enough ahead at the moment to make it hard to turn that result around.
I don't know whether anyone's leading the cheer squad out there, but we'll...
Don't do that, Janet.
But we need to remember that there's a very small proportion of the nation in the tally room, and while they're having a wonderful time, the rest of the country is still trying to hear the results as well.
What's the price? 35.
Julia Gillard, that Queensland result, I mean, you've got 14.5% swing thus far in Leichhardt, you've got a 14.5% swing in Ford, you've got swings you've got that huge swing in Dawson, you've got swings in between. I suppose what we'll never know is how much of that swing is a vote from Queenslanders who just love the idea of having a Prime Minister and a Treasurer in their home state.
Well, I mean, it's obviously impossible to disaggregate, but if we're looking across Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, where we've got the best information, South Australia too, I mean, I think that, the things that have been throughout the campaign, people are interested in an agenda for the future. They've been interested in the agenda Kevin Rudd's laid out. Education's been a big issue, his education revolution, the sense that we need to create more opportunity for Australian children, that we don't want to fall behind the rest of the world. The cost of living issues have been big, housing affordability, childcare and industrial relations, the sense that there was a loss of fairness and balance in workplaces. So I think we can see that, across. Obviously there's always differences in an election campaign, seat to seat and state to state, and we're seeing some of that on display as well.
Tell me this, how do you feel right now? I wonder if it's begun to sink in that you're about to become the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia.
I think I'm going to have to. I think I'm going to have to sleep on it, Kerry. Frankly, to have a sense of the reality of it. It's obviously a sort of a humbling sensation more than anything else. I'm going to have to really think about it overnight.
We've had 3 female premiers. This is the closest we've come in Australia. This is the closest Australia has come to a female Prime Minister. And you're a step away.
Well, if I woke up tomorrow as Deputy Prime Minister, Kerry, I think it'd take me a while to think my way through that.
We might just take a look at the seat of Boothby now, because we do want to go across to that electorate. Anthony, we're looking at 75% of the vote counted. Andrew Southcott is the sitting Liberal member with a 5.4% margin, and he's held the seat.
And Nicole Corns was, of course, a high-profile candidate for the Labor Party, but she's had no impact on this seat, clearly. You can't always draft a star candidate in. They have to have, I don't think she had nearly enough political experience, which was obvious at all times. And so the Labor Party, 53.3 to Liberal, 46.7 to Labor. And Nicole Corns has been defeated, and Andrew Southcott returned as the member for Boothby.
And in fact, in spite of all the shouting behind us, we can go to Nicole Corns now. She's in her seat of Boothby. And Nicole Corns, I'm wondering actually if it is with a sense of relief that you find that you have actually lost this seat.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
I'm wondering if it is in fact, you've got, as an ALP candidate tonight, you've actually gone against the trend. You've lost your seat, or you've lost the chance of getting this seat, let me put it that way. It certainly appears that way. That's how our computers are putting it. I'm wondering if you feel a sense of relief about that.
We put in a very hard fight with this campaign. We worked very hard. The sitting member was in a safe seat and has held that safe seat for 11.5 years. He was out working on train stations and he hasn't done that in a while. So I think we did a very good job of making a very hard, tough fight. And I'm very proud to run for the Australian Labor Party, and Kevin Rudd has won, and that is the result that we were all working hard to achieve.
What does it mean for you? What does it mean for you personally, Nicole? I mean, are you glad now, in a way, that you can move out of the spotlight? You've been thrust in front of the spotlight. Many say you didn't really belong there as a candidate.
Well, what are you representing the media or your electorate? I believe that if you're really sincerely representing your electorate, you can do that. That's what you're fighting for, and that's who you stand up for. The commentary on the way you perform in the media is secondary, really.
And what about the personal side of it? Are you, as I said before, will you be relieved at least to step back from the spotlight now? You'd have to admit, if you looked at half the things that were written about your campaign, it's been a bit of a disaster.
Well, then you'd have to wonder then. The trend was to write what they wrote, so, you know, who really won the seat? The media or Andrew Southcott?
So you're blaming the media for what happened there?
No, I'm saying I wasn't really supported very often, but you know what? I gave it all my best, and that's all we wanted, and that's what anybody could ever do.
I was going to ask you that, in fact. Do you believe you weren't? Do you believe that you were not, in fact, offered enough support by the party?
I had fantastic support by the party. I had fantastic support by Julia Gillard, Peter Garrett, Maxine McHugh, Kevin Rudd. I had fantastic support by our state Labor government and a lot of members and volunteers. I had fantastic support.
Well, bravely stated, Nicole. I'm just wondering what you think then went wrong. What you think went wrong in Boothby?
Well, I'm not a commentator. That's your job to work out, not mine.
Okay, Nicole Corns, we'll leave you there. One last question though before you go. Are you going to give any thought at all to running again, to going back into politics?
We'll just have to see what tomorrow brings, won't we?
Nicole Corns, we will indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Thank you for stating it bravely, and your supporters obviously feel strongly about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to keep the seat run going. We've got some Western Australian figures, but I do want to have a look at Sturt first. This is Adelaide's inner eastern suburbs, held by Christopher Pyne, a junior minister in the Howard government. Margin of 6.8%. We've had nearly 70% of the vote counted, and a substantial swing to the Labor Party, but perhaps not enough, Anthony?
Yes, well, at this stage, what we're getting is that Christopher Pyne's ahead on the primary votes compared to Mia Henshin, who's the Labor Party candidate. There are some Green preferences there, but there's only a small minor party vote going on at this stage, and it looks like there's a swing of 6.4%. We've got 35 of the 43 booths with a preference count. That one's still in doubt. We could see a little bit of moving backwards and forwards, but Christopher Pyne, as the sitting member, would be favoured to win from that point.
OK, we'll look at the seat of Stirling in Perth's northern suburbs. There's nearly 5% of the vote counted. This has been held by the Liberal Party with 2% by Michael Keenan since 2004. As I said, 5% of the vote counted. A little bit of a swing, actually, to the Liberals.
Yes, there's... well, it's on 4 of the 9 booths, and primary votes, the Labor Party vote is up primary on 2.1 on primaries. The Liberal Party vote is the same on primaries, and we've got 4 of the 39 booths with a preference count, and it's indicating that there's a swing of just under 0.6% to the Liberal Party. So the Liberal Party's ahead. That one's not being called at this stage because the numbers aren't enough, far advanced enough to call.
OK, now the seat of Hasluck in metropolitan Perth, named after the former Governor-General, held by the Liberals on a margin of 1.8% by Stuart Henry since 2004. Only 1% of the vote counted. What's it telling us?
Well, it's a very small count at this stage, and Stuart Henry defeated Sharon Jackson at the last election. Sharon Jackson is ahead on the primary votes there. It's a very small count at this stage. We've got, let me see, 2 of 34 booths in, 1 of 34 two-candidate preferreds. It's indicating a 1.7% swing, so the seat's too close to call. That seat's in doubt at this stage.
Okay, we're expecting to hear from Maxine McEwen in the not-too-distant future from the seat of Bennelong, where she's currently leading in that seat against the Prime Minister, but we'll keep the seat count going. The seat of Swan, Perth's inner southern suburbs. 3.3% of the vote counted. This is held by Kim Wilkie since '98 for the Labor Party. A very, very slender margin of 0.1%, Anthony.
Well, he only won it by about 130 votes at the last election, so 104. And he was, I think he was behind and re-elected after Postles and absence, or from memory, but it was a very close contest. The primary votes here are not much different from last time on these booths. This is the important graphic. There's a 1% swing to the Liberal Party at this stage. I've got that swing down to 0.5% on later figures. So at this stage, that seat's still in doubt.
And we're going to Stephen Smith now, who's got an update on what's going on in Western Australia, his home state. Give us some sort of feeling, Stephen.
Well, I think we're in trouble in a couple of seats. I think we're in trouble in Stirling. I think we're in trouble in Cowan. I think Hasluck. I've just had a report from the local scrutineers. I think we're still in with a show in Hasluck. And I think Swan is very, very tight. We've got the local member incumbency, so we're still in the hunt in Swan. On a good day, on what we've seen so far, it'll be 2-2, which will be a score draw. On a bad day, we'll either drop one or trade one.
So the overall picture and how that affects the national count, more importantly?
Net score draw or -1 to Labor. On a real bad day in the West, -2. So that'll, I think, on Anthony Green's tally, would bring it back to 20 or low 20s seats win for Labor.
We haven't got much time on this cross, but what is going on in Western Australia, do you believe? What's causing this?
Well, can I just say there's a big Green vote, so I think that reflects a bit of sort of dissatisfaction with both Labor and the government, firstly. Secondly, 10% economic growth for 2 or 3 years. John Howard takes the credit for that without necessarily being the cause of it. And it's just harder for us to get the message through. And being blunt about it, you have the worst excesses of the ugly face of unionism in the West, which hasn't helped us at all.
All right, Stephen, thanks very much. We'll leave you there. I'll come back to you later.
Okay, now just let me mention in passing, Anthony is saying that Queensland has delivered 10 seats to the Labor Party tonight. Having said that, we're now going to look at the seat of McEwen in Victoria. This is in central Victoria. It's held by Fran Bailey, John Howard's Minister for Small Business and Tourism. She's had it since 1996 with a margin of 6.4%. 74% of the vote counted, Anthony.
Yes, well, she's at this stage held on to the seat. That she's ahead on the primary votes there. There's a significant vote there for the Greens, 45.7 to 40.8 on the primary votes. A lot of the Green preferences are flowing to Labor, and at this stage there's a 5.8% swing to Labor, but it's certainly not enough, and it looks like Fran Bailey's been returned.
We can cross, amidst the shouting, sorry about that, Fran Bailey, but we can cross to you in McEwen.
That was for me.
I don't think it was for you, actually, but nonetheless, you've retained your seat. What are the 96, class of 96, and you're still there battling away by the look of it?
Yes, it's a real nail-biting night tonight, and we've got about 4,600 odd postal votes out there, which we should do very well with those as well.
Tell me, you obviously believe you've retained your seat, you're comfortably retaining it, is that right, Fran?
I wouldn't say comfortably. I think it will go right down to the wire, but it's looking at the moment optimistic for us.
Let me ask you, while I've got you there, about the bigger picture. You're going to lose a lot of colleagues if you do come back to Parliament. It'll be in opposition. There'll be a lot of empty seats. A lot of people that you used to sit next to in Parliament won't be there.
Well, that would appear from what we're seeing as if that will be the case. It's still, we don't know exactly what the picture is. I think this election has actually told us a number of things. If you look at the Green vote in McEwen, which is polled at least 10% right across the electorate, I think what the people of McEwen have been saying is that they are very comfortable, they know what the economy is doing for them, but they're wanting something a bit more.
What do you think has happened in the Victorian seats? Let's stick with your own state. In the Victorian seats which you appear to have lost tonight, what do you think has happened there? What are the telling issues? And let me ask you this, just as a corollary to that, do you think a lot of it is to do with the campaign and how it was run?
Look, it's far too early to make any judgment about that. I think that it is very interesting looking at the swings that we have suffered against us, especially in the regional areas, when we have worked very, very hard. We've been getting very positive feedback, and you know, we've got to take a very good, hard look at the situation. But tonight is it's a little bit too early to go making any quick judgments.
Just finally, Fran Bailey, what will you be looking at? I mean, is it the interest rate rise that happened in the middle of the campaign? Is it the disasters that happened at the end of the campaign? Is it the various cumulative gaffes and so on that happened during the campaign? Or is it just an it's time factor?
I think we'll be looking at all of those factors.
All right, Fran Bailey, we thank you very much and congratulations. Well, it appears anyway that you've retained your seat, so congratulations on that at least.
We're going to continue with our seat coverage now, but just in case you're wondering where all the noise is coming from, some of it you could put down to spontaneous euphoria, some of it you could put down to television networks who don't have enough confidence in their own capacity to sustain an audience with the serious analysis of this exercise of democracy around Australia, and they're having to resort to some clown tricks, but we'll try and persist. The seat of Eden Monaro, which we've been saying a number of times tonight, is the bellwether seat. This is the seat that traditionally has gone with government in the last 14 elections, and it looks like it's doing it again. Gary Nairn is the sitting member. He's been there since '96. With a margin of 3.3%, we've now got 68% of the vote counted, Anthony.
Yes, and Gary Nairn, he's been defeated at this election. He's been the member since 1996. Mike Kelly, the new Labor member, he's won the seat. He's comfortably ahead on the primary votes. He does well with the preferences from the Greens. He's 69 of the 72 boos with a preference count, and Mike Kelly will be elected as the new member for Eden Monaro.
Okay, I understand that Maxine McHugh, who at this stage is leading in the seat of Bennelong, the Prime Minister's seat, is about to make an appearance. One might imagine that Maxine McHugh, if she's actually able to sustain this lead and win the seat of Bennelong, will become a modern Labor hero. This is within the Bennelong electorate. It's at a club, a community club within the electorate, where Maxine McHugh is being mobbed. It would be a little premature to say that she has won the seat, and as Nick Minchin has pointed out a number of times tonight, postal votes may in the end determine the outcome of this election. But at the moment, Maxine McHugh has enjoyed a 5.2% swing to the Labor Party with 70% of the vote counted. And I remind you that John Howard holds this seat with a margin of 4.1%. This could be a moment of Australian political history. If John Howard loses his seat tonight, he will become the second sitting Prime Minister to lose his seat. The first was Stanley Bruce in 1929. And Maxine McHugh, of course, is a former ABC journalist who hailed originally from Queensland. It may take a moment or two for us to be able to hear from Maxine McHugh, but this is an experience that she's seen a lot of things in her journalistic career. She's never experienced anything like this. That graphic is saying that Bennelong is an ALP gain. We're saying that it's yet to be completely played out. It's going to be hard to work out which cheering is coming from where Maxine McHugh is and which is coming from the tally room.
Captain's log, supplementary.